Chapter 1425. Her heart was beating faster than it had ever been. The mirror in the bathroom was clearer than the one outside, and it made her bright red face stand out. What was worse was that, in addition to her red face, the marks on her neck made Yu feel as if she had been a thief. Does this count as adultery? No. I'm adultery. Yu felt like she was about to collapse at the thought. She looked at herself in the mirror, as if she were looking at a stranger. How did this happen? She wasn't like this in the past. Yu had never imagined that she would have an affair, and with Li Jinnan no less. The previous night, no one had been sober. This time Li Jinnan was drunk, and she was sober. How could she be so muddle-headed? This is crazy. Yu scratched her head in frustration. She turned on the tap and slapped her face hard. The temperature on her face finally cooled. Yu took off the clothes she had just put on and used the hot water to rub on the marks on her body. She wasn't sure if it was an illusion, but the bruises seemed to be fading away. After taking a comfortable shower, she walked out. She had thought that Li Jinnan would have left a long time ago. Unexpectedly, the moment she walked out, she saw Li Jinnan standing by the window with both hands on the railing. He held a cigarette in his right hand. He seemed to have heard the commotion and turned around to look at Yu. Yu's hair was wet. She was surprised to see him. He put out the cigarette and said, "Dry your hair, and then we'll go for breakfast." Yu was a little stunned. When she heard that, she couldn't help but blush. She turned around and said, "You don't have to wait for me. You go ahead first. I still have a long time." "How long?" Li Jinnan asked casually. He knew what she was up to. "It's just drying your hair. Do you need help?" Yu's back stiffened. She immediately shook her head. No. The hairdryer was designed to be attached to the wall next to the sink. Yu stood in front of the mirror and dried her hair. When she remembered that Li Jinnan was behind her, she felt a little uncomfortable. Li Jinnan was typing on his phone. When he noticed her stiffness, he walked away and sat on the edge of the bed. After she was done drying her hair, she tidied herself up and slowly picked up her handbag. After confirming that she was done, Li Jinnan looked at the time and muttered to himself, "It's really troublesome for a woman to go out." An hour had passed, and Yu was obviously barefaced. She hadn't put on any makeup. Including the time needed to put on makeup, wouldn't it take 2 hours? When Yu heard what he said, she felt an inexplicable sense of schadenfreude. She replied, "I already told you not to wait for me." Li Jinnan glanced at her from the corner of his eyes before averting his gaze. He placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "I'm willing." Yu felt a weight on her shoulders, and her face turned even redder. She resisted the intimacy. As she tried to push his hand away, she said, "Jiemli, it's not good for others to see this." "Who are the others?" Li Jinnan tilted his head and looked over. His eyes were deep and dark. "Shenluoan? Shenluoan." Those 3 words were like a heavy hammer that smashed into Yu's most sensitive nerve. Chapter 1426. At that moment, he should still be accompanying Guan Kui, or he should have just woken up from Shun Manting's bed. As for me, his legitimate wife, it doesn't matter if I'm dead or alive. As Yu thought about that, she suddenly recalled his reaction when he had been cuckolded the last time. His extremely morbid appearance really resembled that of a hysterical psychopath in a mental hospital. I really don't know how he would react if he found out that I had slept with Li Jinnan twice. Kill me? Or divorce me? As her thoughts reached that point, Yu felt a sense of satisfaction from her revenge. When she realized her reaction, even Yu was shocked. She forced herself to stop those thoughts from growing, but at the same time, she felt an indescribable sense of comfort. It was a strange and comfortable feeling. So being a bad woman is so satisfying. What are you thinking about? A deep magnetic voice came from above her head. When it reached her ear, it sounded like thunder. Yu's heart skipped a beat. She instinctively looked up and met Li Jinnan's clear, dark eyes. It was as if he had seen through everything. Yu's heart skipped a beat. She immediately looked away and shook her head. No. How could it be no? He hadn't said a word the entire time. His hand had practically wrapped around her, but he hadn't seemed to notice it. His mind was elsewhere. Li Jinnan didn't expose her. He put his hand down and took her hand in his. He asked, "Is there anything you want to eat?" Yi Yu struggled for a moment, but when she heard his question, she was surprised. She turned her head and asked, "Are you used to it?" Li Jinnan glanced at her and nodded his head. Yes. Li Jinnan wasn't used to breakfast in the north. Yi Yu was convinced. She was a native of the capital and lived not too far away. Of course, she knew what was good to eat. She said, "Let's go. I'll take you there. Have you tried soy milk before?" Yi Yu asked. The sourness of soybean milk wasn't something everyone could enjoy. When Yi Yu thought of the expression that Li Jinnan would have when he drank the soy milk, she felt a sense of relief. However, Li Jinnan didn't give her any face. He rejected her without hesitation. "No. Didn't you say you could get used to it?" Yi Yu felt a little disdainful. She tried to loosen her grip on his hand, but his grip was firm. She couldn't shake it off. Li Jinnan glanced at her out of the corner of his eye and said, "Even the people in the capital aren't used to drinking soy milk. Don't try to lie to me." Yi Yu asked, "Can you let me go? It's cold. I need to warm my hands." Li Jinnan's expression didn't change. He held her hand tighter. "It's spring now. Oh, I'm horny." Yi Yu was speechless. This was the first time that Yi Yu found this man difficult to deal with. He tried 2 more times, but it didn't budge, so he gave up. Yi Yu felt a little uneasy. This place was very close to her house. If a neighbor saw them, that would be awkward. Yi Yu's heart was in her throat. She turned her head and asked, "We've packed it up. Let's eat at my place." Li Jinnan was a little surprised by her invitation, but his expression remained unchanged. He nodded his head and said, "Sure." Yi Yu finally breathed a sigh of relief. She found a random breakfast place. After ordering a few things, she quickly made her way back home. Unfortunately, the moment she stepped into the elevator, she bumped into her neighbor. Chapter 1427. The auntie lived on the same floor as Yi Yu. Yi Yu lived in 2001, and the auntie lived in 2003. They were neighbors facing each other. She knew Yi Yu very well. When she saw Li Jinnan, her eyes lit up. "Yi Yu, is this your husband? Wow, this young man is great." Yi Yu had wanted to turn around and leave, but when she heard that, she had no choice but to stop in her tracks. She braced herself and stood in the elevator as she watched it close. As the middle-aged woman spoke, her gaze fell on the suggestive marks that Yi Yu's clothes couldn't hide. She smiled as if she had been through it all before and said, "I heard that you got married a long time ago. I didn't expect your husband to be so handsome." As she spoke, her gaze shifted to Li Jinnan and she said, "Hello, I'm Yi Yu's neighbor. The world is small. What a coincidence to meet him. Why did I meet him at this time?" Yi Yu smiled awkwardly and said, "Auntie Zhao, he is not my husband. If he is not, why is he holding hands? And what about the marks on her neck? Isn't it obvious that I am cheating?" When Yi Yu was embarrassed, Li Jinnan suddenly said, "Hello, Auntie. My surname is Li." The smile on Auntie Zhao's face deepened, and she nodded with satisfaction. "Not bad, not bad. You are tall and handsome. But how can you rest assured that your wife lives here alone? You are so incompetent. You have to come often in the future. No matter how busy you are, you have to come home." Li Jinnan's expression remained unchanged. He nodded and said, "I will. Thank you for taking care of Yu Yu while she was living here." That attitude, that tone, it was as if he had admitted that he was her husband's scapegoat. "Oh, don't be so polite. We are all neighbors, and Yu Yu often invites me to dinner." Auntie Zhao was very happy. "You haven't had breakfast yet, have you? I just made a lot of food. Do you want to eat together?" Just then, the elevator reached its destination. Yi Yu quickly refused and said, "Auntie, it's okay. We just bought breakfast." "You are so polite," Auntie Zhao said with a face of rebuke. "The food outside is not as delicious as at home. Come on, come on." Auntie Zhao pulled Li Jinnan and said very enthusiastically, "I haven't eaten either. Let's eat together." Yi Yu was a little anxious. She took Li Jinnan's hand and shouted, "Li Nan." Li Jinnan's footsteps came to a halt. A flash of light flashed across his deep eyes. It was fleeting, but it was dazzling. Yi Yu didn't notice his subtle change. She looked at him pleadingly and said, Let's go home and eat. Auntie Zhao was a little unhappy, but Li Jinnan was in a good mood. He nodded his head and said, Yeah, let's eat at home. Yi Yi breathed a sigh of relief. She dragged Li Jinnan back to the door, and immediately keyed in the password to open the door. Auntie Zhao was even more upset. She mumbled, What the hell is this? How can you hide a man like this? I'm already so old. How can I eat him up? Li Jinnan's hearing was excellent. He heard all the mutterings, and the corners of his lips curled up. When she entered, the decorations inside were still the same as yesterday, but it was much more pleasing to the eye. Yi Yu placed the breakfast on the table and asked, GM Li, when are you returning to Kingstown? Chapter 1428. Oops, Yi Yu's face was burning. She smashed her breakfast on the floor in frustration and retorted, You're still talking about it? It's all your fault. A strange woman pulled you into her house, and you went? Isn't she your neighbor? Li Jinnan asked. Yi Yu choked on her words. She quickly regained her composure and replied, Yes, but isn't she just a stranger to you? Li Jinnan nodded his head. I thought you were on good terms with her. Yi Yu was speechless again. She was indeed on good terms with him. But what did that have to do with him? Humph. Yi Yu's anger flared. You're being too casual when anyone pulls you away. When Li Jinnan heard that, he raised his eyebrows slightly and slowly said, Don't worry. This is the only time. It won't happen again. Yi Yu paused in the act of opening the breakfast box. Her heart raced. Why does his tone sound so much like a husband's promise to his wife? His tone carried a hint of helplessness and affection. It made Yi Yu's heart race. At the same time, deep in her heart, she felt bitter. Once upon a time, she had imagined such a scene in her married life with Shen Luoan. However, I don't care if you know how to or not. Yi Yu suppressed the restlessness in her heart. Let's go after eating, GM Li. Li Jinnan washed his hands and sat down. Okay, let's go back in the afternoon. There's still a lot of work to do. Yi Yu looked up at Li Jinnan and said, I won't be going. You can go back on your own. I've applied for leave. How long? 5 days. After a pause, Yi Yu lowered her head. In a soft voice she said, Today is the 2nd day. 5 days. She had thought that if Guan Kui explained everything clearly, perhaps she could spend a few days with Shen Luoan. However, no matter how much she thought about it, Yi Yu never imagined that her dream would be shattered so completely. Li Jinnan didn't seem to notice the change in her and said, Let's go back together. You have nothing to do in the capital. Why don't you go back to Kingstown? As soon as he said that, he remembered something else. He stopped eating and looked up at Yi Yu without saying a word. Yi Yu was stared at so suddenly that she shook her head. No, you should go back. This is my hometown. I want to stay a few more days. 5 days. Are you back for a divorce? Li Jinnan's voice was a little certain. What happened yesterday? In such a heavy rain, she squatted on the ground and cried. Her posture was so pathetic that it made people's hearts ache. Something must have happened. Otherwise, Yi Yu wouldn't have reacted that way. It's nothing. Yi Yu lowered her head and took a sip of the delicious soy milk, avoiding the topic. When are you getting a divorce? Li Jinnan asked persistently. With that, Yi Yu felt that even the soy milk had lost its flavor. She put down the cup, wiped the corner of her mouth and asked, Do you really like me, GM Li? You like me so much that you don't even mind that I'm a married woman? Or is it because I gave you my first time? That's why you insist on being with me? When Li Jinnan heard Yi Yu's words, he frowned. Chapter 1429. Yi Yu chose her words carefully. Her gaze was fixed on the cup of soy milk on the table, as she waited for Li Jinnan's response. It was as if Li Jinnan was dead. He didn't say a word. Yi Yu didn't dare look up. She continued. Or perhaps, you just think it's more fun to harass a married woman? Li Jinnan chuckled. His deep, dark eyes rippled. He looked into Yi Yu's eyes as if he had heard a joke. He asked, Are you saying that anyone can sleep with you? His words pierced through Yi Yu's defenses. She looked up at Li Jinnan. At that moment, Li Jinnan's eyes were filled with a dangerous aura. It was cold and threatening. Yi Yu's heart skipped a beat. She didn't say a word. Li Jinnan stood up and walked toward her. He enunciated each word clearly. In any case, it's just a layer of membrane. It can be restored at any time. Yi Yu's heart skipped a beat. She was a little afraid. She swallowed hard and shrank back. What are you doing? Li Jinnan's figure was tall. As he moved his legs, his voice was low and slow. There was an indescribable sense of danger in it. In any case, you're going to have to do it a few more times. That way, you won't have to do it again in the future. Yi Yu panicked. She immediately stood up and ran to the side. She said, GM Li, I was just joking. Li Jinnan's eyes darkened. I'm sorry. I took it seriously. He strode over and easily caught Yi Yu. He pulled her into his arms. Yi Yu screamed in fear. She lowered her head and tried to avoid him. She struggled with both hands and quickly said, No, I was wrong. Don't do anything rash. Li Jinnan's anger, that had been on the verge of exploding, dissipated. He found it funny to see Yi Yu's cowardly expression. His expression softened, but he was still displeased. He slowly asked, What did you call me? Yi Yu stopped moving. She was a little confused. She looked up at Li Jinnan and stammered, Nan. Li Jinnan's anger dissipated. With a dark expression he warned, Think carefully about what you can and can't say. Don't ever let me hear something like that again. Yi Yu's face turned red when she heard that. Why? This fellow was too much of a busybody. A look of annoyance flashed across her eyes when she heard him say, Since you're with me, you should end your relationship with Shen Luo, and as soon as possible. A man like him isn't worthy of your affection. Li Jinnan had already investigated Shen Luo and scandals. She had thought that there was something wrong with his body, but it turned out that there was something wrong with his mind. Yi Yu lowered her head when she heard that. Her heart ached as she replied, Whether it's worth it or not, it's up to me to decide. Li Jinnan looked at her deeply. In his heart, he knew that it was impossible for Yi Yu to immediately cut ties with Shen Luoin. This matter could only be discussed at length. It didn't matter. She was his man. Her heart would be his sooner or later. You deserve better. Li Jinnan let go of her and pushed her to a seat. Eat. Yi Yu was completely suppressed by Li Jinnan's aura. She couldn't summon any will to resist. However, as soon as he sat down, his mind became active again. He looked up and asked, GM Li, what kind of relationship do we have? Flirting? Li Jinnan curled his lips and sneered. Vulgar. Isn't that the case? This is an affair within marriage. An adulterous man having sex with a mistress. Yi Yu choked on her soy milk and began to cough violently. Chapter 1430. A mouthful of soy milk got stuck in Yi Yu's throat. She started coughing violently. Her face turned red. Li Jinnan looked at her in surprise. He raised his eyebrows and asked, Am I wrong? Yi Yu's eyes widened. Yi Yu quickly recovered. She gritted her teeth and said, You're the adulterer. When Li Jinnan heard that, he looked at her with a pair of deep eyes. He shook his head and said seriously, No, I'm the adulterer. Yi Yu was speechless. Yi Yu took a big bite of the youtiao and decided to ignore him. After breakfast, Li Jinnan wiped the corner of his mouth and said, Pack up. Let's go. Yi Yu was speechless. I'm not done with my vacation. I'm your boss. I call the shots, Li Jinnan said. He'd been rejected the first time. He'd been rejected twice. This was the third time. And Li Jinnan still hadn't given up. Yi Yu was infuriated. She gritted her teeth and growled, You're squeezing your employees dry. Li Jinnan didn't seem to realize that he was exploiting his employees. He looked at her with a deep gaze and slowly said, I can squeeze you dry in another way. Yi Yu was stunned. She didn't know what he meant. She asked, What? Do you want me to give you a demonstration? With that he walked over. Yi Yu suddenly realized what he was doing. She immediately took a step back and said, No need. Li Jinnan stopped in his tracks and said in a serious tone, If you need it, you can ask. As he said that, he looked at her face. It was as if he'd discovered something. He exclaimed, Why is your face so red? What are you thinking about? He's acting like a hooligan with a straight face. Yi Yu's face heated up. She gritted her teeth and said, No. With that, she turned around angrily and walked into her room. She immediately closed the door and locked it as if she was venting her anger. Li Jinan was in a good mood. He smiled and sat on the sofa, quietly waiting for the good news. At the Shen residence in the capital, it was another day of tossing and turning in bed. Lily looked at the date on her cell phone. There were 3 more days until the wedding. Tomorrow, she could go back to Kingstown and quietly move into her father's house. Then she could wait for Oming to pick her up and be a good bride. She had been living with the Shen family for quite some time. When she closed her eyes, Oming's face seemed to appear in front of her. She hadn't seen him for so long, which made her heart itch even more. She couldn't wait to fly to Kingstown to see him and hug him. Thinking that there were only a few days left before they could meet, Lily's heart was filled with anticipation and nervousness. Just as she was about to call Oming, there was a knock on the door. "Lily, can I come in?" Shen Manting asked. Lily immediately sat up and said, "Come in." Shen Manting quickly pushed the door open and entered. When she saw Lily's slightly disheveled appearance and her slightly flushed cheeks from excitement, she smiled gently and asked, "You're going back to Kingstown tomorrow. Are you happy?" Of course. Without hesitation, Lily was very excited. "I have to try on the wedding dress first. I don't know if I've gained weight in the past few days. What if I can't fit into the wedding dress? I'll go a day earlier to avoid any accidents." Shen Manting nodded her head and said, "Congratulations. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll go with you to Kingstown. I'll be your bridesmaid." "Yeah." Lily's smile deepened. She looked at her neck in surprise and said, "You seem to have put on a lot of weight recently. Your face is even rounder." Shen Manting's smile froze. She lowered her head and said, "Yeah, I've been eating a little too much recently." "I don't think so. You don't seem to have a good appetite recently, and you look a little pale. Are you feeling unwell?" Chapter 1431. Shen Manting shook her head. "No, I've been having afternoon tea these days, so I don't eat much at night. I also cook supper for myself. Of course I'm fat. By the way, have you booked a plane ticket? What time is it?" "My father booked a plane at 3 p.m. tomorrow. It will arrive in Kingstown at around 6 p.m. We can go straight to dinner after we get off the plane. Then, are you going to hide and not see Oming? Otherwise, it will be a waste of effort." Shen Manting smiled. "More than half a month has passed. You haven't seen each other for so long. Will you be able to endure it in Kingstown?" Lily was also thinking about this problem. Just thinking about it made her feel uncomfortable. She sighed and lay down with the quilt in her arms. Her heart was full of mixed feelings. "I can't endure it. My heart is uncomfortable, too uncomfortable." Shen Manting chuckled and looked at Lily enviously. "Then sleep well. Sleep well. I'll book a plane ticket. Send me the flight number." "Okay, good night." Shen Manting's lips curled into a smile, and she quickly walked out. Standing in the dim corridor, Shen Manting's eyes were a little gloomy. She reached out and gently stroked her unflattened belly. After a long time, she walked back to her room. Yi was wearing sunglasses and a hat. She dragged her luggage and walked in front. She had a strange feeling in her heart. The light footsteps of the man behind her were so light that she didn't hear them. Yi paused and turned her head. He was still walking behind her, not too far away or too close. It seemed that he was deliberately avoiding her. Yi breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this guy still has some sense of shame. It would have been bad if I had been photographed at the airport. After leaving the Kingstown airport, Yi was about to sneak in a taxi when a big hand grabbed her by the collar and dragged her back. "The car is here." Li Jinnan's voice was low and brooked no argument. "Where do you want to go?" Yi was caught, but she wasn't embarrassed. She straightened her face and said, "GM, I'll go home myself. I'll give you a ride. Get in the car." Li Jinnan's driver quickly came to open the back door. Yi looked at the car and felt a little uncomfortable. She cleared her throat and called out, "GM, go in." Li Jinnan's voice was emotionless, and his eyes were deep and cold. It made Yi swallow the words that were on the tip of her tongue. Yi obediently got into the car. Very quickly, Li Jinnan got into the car with her. When Yi saw that the car was on the highway, she removed her sunglasses and hat and let out a long sigh. "Kingstown is so hot." Li Jinnan glanced at her and leaned back against the back of the chair. He dryly said, "Then take it off." Yi Yu was speechless. "I shouldn't have said anything in the first place." Soon, they arrived at the neighborhood where Yi Yu lived. Yi Yu grabbed her suitcase and got out of the car. She waved at him with a look of liberation and shouted, "Goodbye, Jiemli." With that, she turned and ran away. Li Jinan watched Yi Yu's back view from the car. He rubbed his nose in exasperation and asked the driver, "Am I that scary?" The driver smiled. "Girls get nervous when they see a handsome guy." "Is that so?" Li Jinan expressed his doubts and turned to look in the direction that Yi Yu had left. He realized that Yi Yu didn't enter the neighborhood immediately. Instead, she walked into a pharmacy. Why would he go to the pharmacy? Li Jinan vaguely seemed to have guessed something. "Jiemli, Missy seems to have gone to buy some medicine. Do you want to go and take a look?" "There's no need. Let's go." Chapter 1432. Li Jinan sat in the car and slowly retracted his gaze. He narrowed his eyes and said, "Let's go back to the old manor." Yi Yu entered the pharmacy and bought a box of birth control pills. Only after swallowing them did her heart finally relax. This was the second time Yi Yu had taken birth control pills. The first time was also because of Li Jinan. Yi Yu's heart was filled with guilt. In her subconscious mind, her behavior had already made her a bad woman. Not only had she made her husband a cuckold, but she was also involved with her own boss. Was she doing something unspoken? Yi Yu's thoughts were running wild, and the elevator accidentally went past. She had no choice but to press the button to go back. The moment the elevator door opened, before Yi Yu could step out, she saw a face that was far from what she had expected. Shenjilia was surprised to see Yi Yu. "Sister-in-law? Aren't you in the capital?" Yi Yu was stunned. She was equally surprised. "Why are you in Kingstown? Are you looking for Chantian?" "Ah." Yi Chantian's voice drifted over. "You're back so soon. Hurry up and put your luggage down. Let's go eat together." Yi Chantian seemed to be in a good mood that day. She took her luggage and headed back. As she walked, she felt for her keys. "Didn't you say you were going to the capital to see a patient? How's the patient?" Shenjilia turned his head to look at Yi Yu. "Yeah, didn't you go to see Guangquei? Why are you back so soon?" Yi Yu was momentarily embarrassed, but she quickly replied, "I went to see her. She's fine. With your brother taking care of her, I came back first." "Isn't Shenjilia's brother your husband? He's taking care of her?" Yi Chantian looked incredulous. "What about you? Didn't you say she's a very important friend to you?" "A very important friend?" Yi Yu smiled bitterly. She was indeed very important. She had waited for her for 7 years. Who knew that she would be given such a huge surprise the moment she woke up? When she saw Yi Yu's reaction, Yi Chantian felt even angrier. She stopped in her tracks and yelled in exasperation, "Hey, no matter how important you are, you can't let your husband take care of another woman. Although Shen Luoan is a jerk, he was married to you. Why did you come back like a fool? You're too stupid. Isn't this clearly helping this pair of adulterous couple? AI. Staying would be the greatest injustice to her." Yi Yu felt bitter in her heart, but she didn't say another word. When Yi Chantian saw Yi Yu's expression, she knew that Yi Yu was in a foul mood. She sighed and said, all right. Let's go and have lunch. Let's not bother about them anymore." "Oh right, Yi Yu. Do you remember what day it is today?" "What day?" Yi Chantian whispered. "Today is the day my father is divorcing your mother." Divorce anniversary? Those words surfaced in her mind. She instinctively thought of the future. If she were to divorce Shen Luoan, she would probably face the same fate one day. However, what was the point of remembering such a day? She didn't even know if she could get a divorce. Yi Yu was a little absent-minded. When Yi Chantian tugged at her, she suddenly snapped out of it. Shenjilia looked at Yi Yu. His eyes bore some resemblance to Shen Luoan's. He gazed at Yi Yu and slowly asked, "Yi, do you want to divorce my brother?" Yi Yu was momentarily stunned, but she quickly nodded her head with determination. "Yes. Dash." Chapter 1433. When Shenjilia heard that, he looked at Yi Yu for a long time before nodding his head. "Got it." Yi Yu couldn't understand Shenjilia's expression. She couldn't help but take a second look at him in confusion. After a moment, Shunjilia smiled and waved his hand. It's fine. Let's go. What do you want to eat? Your old friend will welcome you back. Yi Yu vaguely felt that Shunjilia was plotting something, but she couldn't figure out what it was. Very quickly the luggage was settled. Yi Yu was pulled out by Yi Qianqian and Shunjilia. Li Jinnan had just gotten out of the car when he saw a chubby little figure running toward him from afar. She called out in a childish voice, "Uncle!" Li Jinrui's little body paused. Her round face was rosy, and she smiled like a flower. "You're back!" When Li Jinnan saw the little girl, he couldn't help but smile. At the same time, he walked in her direction, squatted down, and reached out to pull her into his arms. The little girl was very excited and said, Uncle is back too. He even brought a beautiful woman with him. Wow, she's really beautiful. Li Jinrui danced as she described the beautiful woman's appearance. Short hair, sharp face, big eyes, and so pretty. The brothers like her too. Uncle, hurry up and go in to take a look. Li Beixing brought a woman back? How is that possible? Li Jinnan found it hard to believe. He carried the little girl and walked inside. Just as he entered the living room, he heard the lively chatter coming from inside. There were both men and women. Among them, Li Xiao and Qin Shuhua's gratified laughter was very attractive. Good. From now on, our eldest brother will depend on you. Oh my, I've been so worried for so long. I didn't expect our eldest brother to be enlightened and find such a beautiful girl to come back. Qin Shuhua was very happy as she held the hand of a girl. The girl had willowy eyebrows, big eyes, and double eyelids. Her nose wasn't very sharp, and her mouth was very small. Her face was small and sharp, and her hair was short and dyed an ordinary orange-brown. She was wearing a summer pantsuit and looked very capable and beautiful. This Li Jinnan found it hard to believe and asked tentatively, Dr. Qiu? When Qiu Manyu heard Li Jinnan's voice, she turned her head and looked over. She flashed a toothy smile and greeted Li Jinnan. Major Li, long time no see. His candid and natural tone sounded like he was meeting an old friend that he hadn't seen for a long time. Ever since Li Jinnan had retired, he hadn't seen her in the past 4 to 5 years. You and my brother. Li Jinnan couldn't believe it. Together? Li Beixing walked out. When he saw Li Jinnan's reaction, he harumphed and said, Why? Can't I? I'm already so old. Can't I find a wife? Li Jinnan's jaw dropped in disbelief. When they were in the army, Qiu Manyu was a military doctor, and Li Beixing was a lieutenant colonel. But for some reason, every time the two of them met, they would fight, be it verbally or in actual combat. In any case, there would always be some conflict. Now they actually brought him back to meet his parents. In other words, they had already been together for a long time, to the point of discussing marriage. Chapter 1434. Qiu Manyu laughed when she saw Li Jinnan's dumbfounded expression. Li Beixing was a little smug. He stepped forward and patted Li Jinnan on the shoulder meaningfully. He said, Third brother, you're the only one left. Look at your second brother. He's about to have his second child. Uncle Carrie. Li Jinrui moved past Li Jinnan and reached out to Li Beixing. Li Beixing picked up the little girl and asked, Can you let your little uncle marry a little aunt for you? Li Jinrui didn't know that much. She blinked and said, Do you mean to let little uncle marry a wife? Li Beixing touched the little girl's nose and said, Smart child. When Li Jinrui heard that, she smiled and said, Okay, let uncle marry a wife. That way, uncle will have someone to sleep with at night. The little girl's words made Qin Shuhua smile. She asked, Why should uncle find someone to sleep with? Li Jinrui was stumped by the question. She tilted her head and thought for a while before saying, In our family, other than uncle and great-grandfather, everyone else sleeps in pairs. Great-grandfather is old, so he won't be afraid. Uncle is only a little younger than dad. He should find a wife to sleep with so he won't be afraid. However, as she spoke, her voice became softer and softer. She said in distress, But uncle is a man. Why would he be afraid? Li Jinrui's words made everyone present unable to restrain their laughter. Li Jinnan chuckled and said, That's right. Why would uncle be afraid? Li Jinrui couldn't figure it out. She frowned and tilted her head for a long time. I don't want to think anymore. Where are your parents? They're in the room. Dad is chatting with little brother. Hee, I think Dad is so silly. Little brother doesn't know how to speak. As Li Jinrui spoke, she struggled to get down and said, Uncle, I'm going to play with big brother. You can play with auntie. The little girl quickly got down and ran inside. Li Beixing smiled and sat next to Qiumanyu. He said, time passes so quickly. Second brother's 2 children can already run and jump. In the blink of an eye, the second child is about to be born. Sigh. Qiumanyu glanced at him and snorted. If you had taken the initiative just now, our children would also be running around. Li Beixing suddenly felt a little embarrassed. He chuckled and drank a cup of tea to hide his embarrassment, not saying anything. Li Jinnan felt that there was more to it than met the eye. With a smile in his eyes, he raised his eyebrows and said, It looks like you've decided on it. When did it start? It's been a long time, maybe 2 or 3 years. You're the only one. I heard that you've been very busy recently, flying here and there on business trips. What do you think? It's better to be in the army, isn't it? Li Beixing tossed a cigarette to Li Jinnan and asked, You can't go on like this. Why don't you ask Grandpa to find you a partner like second brother? You can just get married and be done with it. Li Jinnan took the cigarette and immediately shook his head. He replied, That won't do. As he spoke, he lit the cigarette. There's no rush. When the time comes, I'll bring it back for you to see. Li Beixing understood him very well. Hearing this, he composed himself and said with a smile, Yo, you have a target now? His gaze was mischievous and probing. Li Jinnan subconsciously thought of Yi Yi's blushing face when she faced him. He took a puff of his cigarette and chuckled without saying a word. Such a reaction was unintentionally a tacit agreement. Chapter 1435. When he heard his mother's words, Li Jinnan lit his cigarette and laughed. Don't worry. It won't happen. When Qin Shuhua saw the expression on Li Jinnan's face, she knew that he had a target in mind. She smiled from ear to ear and said, Wow, all 3 of my sons have matured. They know how to get a wife. When are you bringing her home for me to take a look? I'll help you identify her. Li Jinnan took a puff of his cigarette and shook his head. We haven't even gotten married yet. When the time is right, I'll bring her home. Qin Shuhua's smile became even brighter. She nodded her head and said, As long as you know what you're doing, don't worry. With that, she looked at Qiumanyu and asked, When are you planning to get married? Qiumanyu didn't say a word. She looked at Li Beixing. With a serious expression, Li Beixing replied, The sooner the better. I can wait, but the children can't wait. When he said that, the people around them were even more shocked. At that moment, Captain Li Sun walked out. When he heard that, shock appeared on his wizened face. He asked, What? The girls are all pregnant. The old man's voice had obviously aged a lot. From afar, he looked old with a hunched back and a head of white hair. Su Qianxi helped Grandpa walk out carefully. When she heard the news, she seemed to be very surprised and said, Brother, is that true? Qiumanyu's face was a little red. She glared at Li Beixing. Li Beixing didn't seem to realize that he had done anything wrong. He smiled and said, Yeah, if I'm not careful, I might get pregnant. That's why I say the sooner the better. When Li Jinnan heard that, he sighed even more. He shook his head and chuckled. You're too fast. Of course. I'm the big brother. If I'm fast, you won't have an excuse to reject me. Li Beixing held Qiumanyu's hand and said, Mom, let's eat. I'm hungry. Qin Shuhua was even happier. She stood up and happily walked over to the phone. She said, All right. Hurry up and get to the table. I'll call your father and ask him to come home early. When Li Xiqing came out, he was followed by 2 little boys, one in his arms. On his cold and tough face, there was a slight smile. Captain Li looked at his children and grandchildren and smiled even more happily. Patting Su Qianxi's hand, he looked at Su Qianxi's belly, which was not yet visible, and then at Qiumanyu's belly, which was not yet flat. He said, You have to quickly name your child. Haha, don't look back. If I leave, you won't even have the chance to name your child. Nonsense. Su Qianxi immediately retorted and said with some dissatisfaction, You are in good health. Exactly. The crisp voice of a little girl could be heard. Li Jianhua shouted, Long live great-grandfather. Great-grandfather will live to a ripe old age. Great-grandfather is only 75 years old now. There are still 25 years to go. Li Jianxian chimed in and said, In another 25 years, great-grandfather, my son will be born. When the time comes, great-grandfather will help me choose a name for him. Me too. Me too. Li Mosin joined in the fun and said, Great-grandfather, the names great-grandfather come up with are very nice. The children's crisp words brought tears to Captain Li's eyes. He nodded his head and said, Yes, yes. Great-grandfather wants to live until then. However, as he said those words, his withered and aged hands trembled slightly. Li Sun was well aware of that. No one knew if he could live until then. Chapter 1436. Li Xiao walked in from the outside and saw his children and grandchildren. Especially when he saw Li Beixing and Qiu Manyu by his side. His experienced and shrewd eyes were filled with joy. When Su Qianxi saw Li Xiao, she called out, Dad. Grandpa. Hello, Grandpa. Dad. The greetings came one after another. Li Xiao felt an inexplicable warmth in his heart. He smiled brightly and said, Let's take a family photo. The so-called family photo was a happy moment when the whole family was gathered together. Captain Li Sun sat in the middle, and the children stood beside him. Behind them were Li Xiao and his wife, Li Beixing and his wife, and Li Jinnan. There were not too many people, and not too few people. When the Polaroid took down the photo, Captain Li's eyes reddened when he saw it. Good, very good. Li Jianhua was a little confused. She blinked her eyes and stared into her great-grandfather's eyes, but she didn't say anything. She grabbed the photo and squatted down beside Captain Li to take a closer look. Li Xiqing took out the DSLR and took a few photos. It wasn't just a family photo. He also took a close-up of everyone and captured everyone's smiling faces. Every couple had a group photo. There were also photos of a few little guys, squatting, running, jumping, and laughing. But when it was Li Jinnan's turn, he was alone. His posture was tall and straight, and his eyes were sharp. He was strong and muscular. When Li Jinnan saw his own photo, he couldn't help but add another person to his mind. If only Yi Yuyu was standing by his side, that would be great. I have to quickly get her to divorce Shen Luoan. As he thought about it, the people around them started to make a ruckus. The family of more than 10 people sat at the dining table. It was lively. The old man ate slowly, his face full of smiles and kindness. After the meal, Qiu Manyu and Li Beixing accompanied the old man for a walk. The children brought them along to play. Li Jinnan sat on the sofa with a cigarette in his mouth. He didn't light it. He sat opposite Su Qianxi and looked at her belly. He asked, How long has it been? More than 2 months. The baby is very healthy. Su Qianxi reached out to touch her belly with a smile on her face. She looked very happy and turned to look at Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing held her arm and glanced at the cigarette in Li Jinnan's mouth. He said, Pregnant women are not allowed to smoke here. Li Jinnan smiled helplessly and waved his hand. All right. I didn't smoke. You really have a girlfriend? Li Xiqing was still in disbelief. Do I know her? Li Jinnan shook his head. Not yet. I'm working hard. Holding his wife's hand, he said, The day after tomorrow is Oming's wedding. If possible, it would be best if you could trick her into coming here to meet him. That's right. Li Jinnan laughed and said, I'm not that easy. I'll try. Grandpa is getting old, and you are the only single man left in the family. You have to be ambitious, and see if you can let Grandpa hold your child. Li Xiqing's voice was not loud, but his words were sharp. Li Jinnan felt a little uncomfortable. He pursed his lips and nodded his head. When he thought of Yi Yuyu and Shen Luoan's current situation, he sighed and said, I'll try my best. Yi Yuyu's attitude was very clear. Whether it was forced or an accident, she was willing to be with him. Chapter 1437. With that thought in mind, Li Jinnan's brows furrowed. His sharp, almond-shaped eyes were filled with calculation. Judging from Shen Luoan's attitude, he didn't seem willing to divorce Yi Yuyu. Since there were those rumors about him and his sister, It proved that Shen Luoan wasn't gay. So why was Shen Luoan, a healthy and mentally sound man, so indifferent to his wife? If Li Jinnan wanted them to get a divorce, he had to start with that. Narrowing his eyes, Li Jinnan tapped the cigarette in his hand and quickly stood up. I'm going out for a while. With that, he turned and left without waiting for their response. Li Xiqing didn't mind. With his wife in his arms, he looked down at her belly and said, Your uncle is in love. We have to understand him. Su Qianxi snorted and pushed his head away. Go away. The baby's heart just started beating. Who are you talking to? Li Xiqing didn't mind at all. The corners of his lips curled up. After Li Jinnan left the house, he drove his car out onto the main road. He rolled down the windows, and the wind blew in, making Li Jinnan shiver. He picked up the phone and dialed Mila's number. Mila wasn't only Yi Yuyu's manager, but she had also been her good friend for many years. If there was anything he could ask Mila, he would have a clue. Indeed, after hearing Li Jinnan's question, Mila thought for a moment and replied, Yuyu's husband and Yuyu grew up together. Yuyu and I were classmates, and we often hung out with them. Shen Luo and is a very warm person, and he treats Yuyu especially well. When we were in college, something happened to Yuyu's sister, and Yuyu was in a coma for about a week. She took a month off from school. Not long after she woke up, she moved out of her stepfather's house. She didn't contact me for a long time, but I heard that she didn't have a good relationship with her family, and she rarely saw Shen Luoan. Mila's words were concise and to the point. Li Jinnan couldn't help but fall into deep thought. After thinking for a moment, he asked, When did she marry Shen Luoan? Well, Mira thought about it. It was probably in the first half of last year. It wasn't a long time, but after they got married, Yi didn't seem very happy, and they often lived apart. Mira was a shrewd person. At this point, she already knew where to stop. Jiemli, when Yi was hospitalized, I was too busy and only visited a few times. However, I heard from Yuyu's biological sister that Senior Shen only visited once. Other than medical fees, he didn't even visit. Such a heartless man. I really feel bad for Yuyu. Yuyu's sister? Is it the one who was injured earlier? No, the injured one's surname is Guan. She's Yuyu's stepfather's daughter. The one taking care of her in the hospital is surnamed Yi. They share the same father and mother. Did that stepsister visit Yuyu during that period? Li Jinnan asked. Mira laughed. Guan Kui went crazy a few years ago. How could she have visited her? It was also from that time that Yuyu's relationship with the people around her deteriorated. Everyone insisted that Yuyu was the one who pushed her down. But I believe that Yuyu isn't that kind of person. Li Jinnan's frown deepened. After some thought, he nodded his head and said, I got it. In that case, the turning point was Yi Yuyu's sister. Everyone insisted that Yi Yuyu was the one who pushed her stepsister down. And Yi Yuyu had been unconscious for more than a week. In that case, the problem must have arisen during that week. There had to be a connection between that and Shen Luoan. Chapter 1438. After hanging up, Li Jinnan smoked a cigarette in the car. Then he slowly started the car. The Bentley was very eye-catching on the road. When it stopped in front of Yi Yuyu's apartment, it attracted a lot of attention. After parking the car, Li Jinnan called Yi Yuyu from downstairs. Yi Yuyu seemed to be busy. It rang a few times before she picked up. However, it wasn't Yi Yuyu's voice that came through. It was another woman's voice. Hello. Li Jinnan could tell that it was Yi Yuyu's sister, Yi Qianqian. Hello, I'm looking for Yi Yuyu. Yuyu is taking a shower. Why are you looking for her? Yi Qianqian seemed a little tired. She was yawning as she replied lazily. Li Jinnan was silent for a moment before saying, When she's done, ask her to come downstairs. I'll be at the entrance of your apartment. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she immediately perked up. Her eyes lit up as she said, Really? Let me see. Yi Qianqian ran to the window of the back room and looked down. She immediately saw the eye-catching Bentley. The luxurious black body of the car was eye-catching at a glance. Yi Qianqian felt that her eyes were about to shine. She asked, What car are you driving? Li Jinnan was silent for a moment before asking, Is there a problem? I only saw a Bentley. Is it yours? Yeah. Is Yi done? Li Jinnan's voice was a little dull as he slowly lit a cigarette. Not yet. I'll go rush her. As he said that, Li Jinnan heard the sound of slippers hitting the wooden floor. It was followed by Yi Qianqian shouting, Yu, your GM Li is looking for you. When Li Jinnan heard that, he couldn't help but laugh. For some reason he was in a good mood. Your GM Li. Her GM Li. Yeah, this sister is pretty good. I'll have to be filial to her in the future. Li Jinnan took a puff of his cigarette and waited for the response. Soon Yi Qianqian replied, GM Li, Yu is done, but she doesn't seem to be in a good mood. Would you like to come up and have a seat? Li Jinnan hadn't expected that Yi Qianqian would invite him up. He had originally thought that she wouldn't welcome a stranger. Li Jinnan was more than happy to have such an opportunity. When he heard the suggestion, Li Jinnan pretended to mull it over for a moment before replying. All right. Hold on. I'll stop the car. When Yi Qianqian saw the flashy Bentley limousine slowly moving forward, her heart filled with excitement. She jumped up and said, Yu, are you done showering? A guest is coming up. Yu had just turned off the water. When she heard Yi Qianqian's words, she wiped her body with a towel and asked loudly, who is it? Is it your friend? Male or female? A man. Not my friend, your friend. My friend. Yi was a little confused. She dried her hair and walked out in her bathrobe. Who is it? She asked. Your President Li. I invited him up. Yi was taken aback. She frowned and asked, What? GM Li? What was he doing here? And why did you call him up? This is so awkward. Chapter 1439. Yi Qianqian was speaking from the bottom of her heart. Regardless of whether it was in terms of looks, background, or ability, Li Jinnan was better than Shen Luoan. If she could be with Li Jinnan, all the suffering Yi Yu had endured wouldn't have been in vain. Yi Yu was pushed into the room. She rubbed her hair with exasperation and said, I'm going to blow dry my hair. Yi Qianqian almost cried out when she heard that. Is this silly sister of mine finally getting the hang of it? She was so happy that her face bloomed. Yi Qianqian quickly replied, Yes. Don't be too hasty. Not long after Yi Yu entered the room, the doorbell rang. Yi Qianqian opened the window. When she saw Li Jinnan's handsome face, she was overjoyed. After she opened the door, she immediately welcomed him in and said, GM Li, what a rare visitor. Yu is still inside. Please come in and take a seat. The moment Li Jinnan walked in, Yi Qianqian could smell the scent of cigarettes on him. Yi Qianqian took a whiff and casually asked, GM Li, do you smoke? Li Jinnan turned his head and glanced at her. He nodded his head and replied, I just smoked one. Is the smell strong? Why don't I stand at the door for a while? Yi Qianqian quickly waved her hands. No. It's fine. I don't mind. Come on in. Li Jinnan found Yi Qianqian interesting. He pursed his lips and looked down at the slippers on her feet. Do you need to change your shoes? He asked. No. Yi Qianqian walked in. Just treat this like your own home. She raised her voice and called out, Yu, GM Li is here. Are you ready? Yu didn't reply. Li Jinnan walked in and sat down on the sofa naturally. He replied, It's fine. I'll wait a while. It's nothing urgent. Yi Qianqian felt that this man was full of gentlemanliness. She poured a glass of fruit juice for Li Jinnan and handed it to him with both hands. She then sat down in front of him and whispered, GM Li, you seem to like our Yu a lot. Li Jinnan nodded his head. His expression was natural as he replied, I do. Yi Qianqian was pleasantly surprised. Is it the kind of liking that I understand? It should be. Yi Qianqian clapped her hands and said, That makes things easier. Actually, GM Li, I won't hide it from you. Yu must have told you that she's actually married. She was married to Shen Luoan before. Do you know Shen Luoan? He's one of the imperial capital's 3 young masters, who's known as the Ghost Doctor. Li Jinnan's expression was natural. He nodded his head and replied, I've heard a little about it. I'm aware of the incident as well. But I heard that his private life isn't very discreet. With his sister. Tisk. Yi Qianqian looked as if she had found a confidant. She was a little excited as she said, Yeah. Isn't that right? That kind of thing is not worthy of our Yu at all. But he refuses to get a divorce. God knows how much my heart aches for our Yu. When she was injured and hospitalized, he only came once. After paying the medical fees, he never came again. What can I do? I am also very desperate. Behind such a long line of foreshadowing, there must be a big plan. Li Jinan nodded and followed her words. He asked, "It's quite miserable. So, what do you think I should do to make it more appropriate?" Chapter 1440. When Yi Qianqian said that, she deliberately observed Li Jinan's reaction. His expression remained impassive. She couldn't tell if he was happy or angry. Yi Qianqian cursed in her heart. Yet another person, who can't see his true colors. However, Yi Qianqian hardened her heart and continued egging him on. You have to know that when a girl is vulnerable, it's easiest for her to fall in love with another person. Now that our Yu has suffered a setback in her relationship, she's extremely disappointed in Shen Luoan. If that were to be written into a novel, it would be a tragic story. At this time, you want me to take advantage of the situation? Li Jinan interrupted her. His words hit the nail on the head. Yi Qianqian's words were stuck in her throat. She was a little embarrassed. She instinctively said, "That's not what I meant. Can I smoke?" Li Jinan was in a strange mood. He looked at Yi Qianqian with his almond-shaped eyes and interrupted her. Perhaps because the topic was a little off-topic, Yi Qianqian was stunned for a moment before she nodded her head. Sure. Li Jinan took out his pack of cigarettes and took one out. He didn't light it. He played with it in his hand and slowly said, "I'm working on it, but I think I'll need your cooperation." Yi Qianqian's eyes lit up. She clicked her tongue and said excitedly, "I can tell that you're a passionate person. What are you talking about?" Yi Yu's voice came from inside. The two of them turned their heads at almost the same time. They immediately saw Yi Yu in her light blue pajamas. Yi Yu's hair had just been blow-dried. It was draped over her shoulders. She didn't have any makeup on. Her face was a little pale, and she looked a little thin. Li Jinan looked at her and frowned. He asked, "Have you finished eating?" Yi Yu hadn't expected that to be the first thing he would say when she arrived. She immediately replied, "Yes." "Okay." Li Jinan took out a match and lit his cigarette. "Let's go." "Huh?" Yi Yu was a little confused. "Where are we going?" "To eat supper." Li Jinan stood up and took a drag of his cigarette. She exhaled a puff of white smoke that brushed past her almond-shaped eyes. Li Jinan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said in a firm tone, "You're too skinny. You need to put on some weight." Yi Qianqian quickly nodded in agreement and said, "Yeah, I think so too. Let's go." We had dinner in the afternoon, and it's been 3 or 4 hours. It's time for supper. You go and get changed." Yi replied, "I'm not hungry. I have something to tell you." Li Jinan looked at her and said, "Leave us." Yi Qianqian felt as if her maiden heart was about to explode. The way he spoke and the way he smoked. Wasn't that exactly how she imagined her dream man to be? Ao. Unfortunately, the grass was already taken. And it was his own sister. However, at least it wasn't eaten by other people's cows, so it wasn't a loss. Yi didn't feel like going out and said, "If you have anything to say it here. My sister isn't an outsider." "Yeah, let's go together." Li Jinan gently flicked the ash into the trash can and said, "Let's get together." Yi Qianqian gave Li Jinan a thumbs up in her heart and nodded her head. "Okay, let's go together." In order to make it easier for Li Jinan to take advantage of the situation, as his future sister-in-law, she had to be cooperative. Chapter 1441. Yi Yu's words were stuck in her throat. She was speechless. Looking at Yi Qianqian, she couldn't resist her moral blackmail. After changing her clothes, the living room was filled with the faint smell of tobacco when she walked out. Li Jinan was tall and dressed simply, but his aura couldn't be concealed. They went down the stairs and found a restaurant. Yi Qianqian ordered a few things and left the decision to Li Jinan. Li Jinan had just finished dinner, so he wasn't hungry. He followed his memory and ordered a few dishes that Yi Yu might like before throwing the menu back. Yi Yu sat to the side and appeared very obedient. She asked, "GM, why are you looking for me so late at night?" "Yeah. My friend is getting married the day after tomorrow. Why don't you come along?" Li Jinnan tapped his fingers on the table. "Be my female companion." "Hey, the friend you're talking about isn't Oming, is it?" Yi Chanqian asked. "I'm going too. But Lily seems to have invited Shen Luoan's sister. Her name is Manting or something. Isn't it a little inappropriate for Yi Yu to be the female companion?" Li Jinnan raised his eyebrows and asked, "Is that so?" "Yeah. It's fine. It's fine as long as I'm coming. Anyway, I'm just here to be a part of Oming's wedding." Li Jinnan took a sip of tea and said slowly, "After you get divorced, we can go back to being the main characters." Yi Yu was caught off guard by his unexpected words. She coughed lightly and looked at Yi Chanqian guiltily. She immediately noticed Yi Chanqian's gossipy eyes. She picked up a teacup and took a sip. "Oh, I'll be there when you get married." Yi Yu's meaning couldn't be clearer. She was trying to distance herself from Li Jinnan in front of Yi Chanqian. Li Jinnan acted as if he didn't understand. He nodded his head and said, "Yeah. I heard that Oming prepared 3 wedding dresses for his wife. I'll prepare 4 for you. You can't lose out to him." Yi Yu almost choked on her tea. The tea got stuck in her throat, and she started coughing violently. She didn't know if it was because she was choking, but her face turned red. Li Jinnan frowned slightly. He reached out and patted Yi Yu's back lightly. "Why are you so careless? Don't you know how to drink water?" Yi Yu coughed even more violently. She reached out to push his hand away and shook her head. She pretended that she couldn't see or hear anything. She took a sip of tea and savored it carefully. With a heartfelt sigh, she said, "This tea is pretty good." Li Jinnan was in a good mood. He casually replied, "It's all right." At this moment, the waiter served the crispy fried pork tenderloin and placed it on the plate. Yi Yu felt as if she had been granted amnesty. She immediately picked up her chopsticks, picked up a piece, and stuffed it into her mouth. As she chewed on the meat, she stopped talking. Li Jinnan seemed to have thought of something and asked, "What do you think?" Yi Yu pretended not to hear him as she ate. She buried her head in her bowl. When Li Jinnan saw her behavior, the corners of his mouth lifted up imperceptibly. He pretended not to notice and said in a serious tone, "If it's not enough, we can add more." "GM, Yi Yu couldn't take it anymore." She interrupted Li Jinnan. Her tone sounded forced and stiff as she said, "I'm hungry." Chapter 1442. Yi Yu suddenly felt like she couldn't eat anymore. It was unbearable. Yi Chanqian looked at the sky. She couldn't see in that instant. Yi Chanqian felt that it had been a mistake to follow them. However, based on their reactions, their relationship didn't seem to be as simple as it seemed. After the meal, Yi Yu's stomach was so full that she didn't feel like getting up. It's not good for your stomach to eat so much in the middle of the night. Li Jinnan poured her a cup of tea and said lightly. She glared at him and said, "If you weren't here, I wouldn't have been able to eat so much." Li Jinnan looked a little surprised and nodded his head. With a look of satisfaction on his face, he said, "I never expected that I'd be a feast for the eyes." Yi Yu was speechless. She picked up her teacup and took a sip. For a moment she was speechless. "However, no matter how charming I am, you shouldn't eat so much," Li Jinnan said sarcastically as he lit up a cigarette. "What can I do? I've already eaten it." Yi Yu was a little annoyed. Why was this man so shameless? If you gave him a pole, he could fly straight into the sky. Li Jinnan slowly puffed out a ring of smoke and calmly replied, "In that case, I can only do some aerobic exercise to aid digestion." She coughed violently and spat out a mouthful of water. Almost at the same time, Li Jinnan and Yi Yu looked over. Yi Chanqian blushed. She quickly wiped her face with a tissue and coughed lightly. Was she thinking wrongly? Doing aerobic exercise in the middle of the night? This Yi Yu blushed when she saw Yi Chanqian's reaction. She stood up and said to Li Jinnan bluntly, "You pay the bill. I'm going for a walk in the park." Li Jinnan had no objections. He nodded slightly, stood up and walked out. After paying the bill, Li Jinnan followed them as they strolled leisurely. He looked around and commented, The environment isn't too bad, but the security needs to be strengthened. This place doesn't seem too safe. Why are there so many bad people? Enough is enough, Yi Yu said in exasperation as she quickened her pace. Yi Qianqian was surprised to hear Yi Yu's tone. From the very beginning, Yi Yu had been teasing him. If this had been in the past, Yi Yu would have held it in and not said a word. She would have told her in secret when she got home. This was a habit she had developed after being by Shen Luo An's side for several years. That night, Yi Yu had completely lost the shadow of the yes man. It was as if she had returned to the time before Guan Kui had gotten into trouble. Yi Yu was a little stubborn and a little hot-tempered. Very real, very cute. When Yi Qianqian saw that, she gave Li Jinnan a sidelong glance. Yi Qianqian stood behind them and said, Yu, I just remembered that I still have a draft to review. I'll head back first. I have to work overtime. Why don't you take a walk with GM Li and digest your food? As she spoke, she didn't wait for Yi Yu's reply. She turned around and waved her hand widely. Yi Yu was dumbfounded. Did Yi Qianqian just sell me off? Sister. Yi Qianqian turned around with a smile and said, It doesn't matter if you come back later. Let's have a good chat. It didn't matter if he didn't come back. Anyway, she would definitely lock the door tonight. GM Li, whether you succeed or not depends on yourself. Chapter 1443. Yi Yu had been betrayed by her most trusted sister. She felt a little conflicted. She knew that Yi Qianqian was doing it for her own good. In all fairness, Li Jinnan was indeed a very good man. Regardless of his background, personality, or looks, he was top-notch. It was precisely because of this that Yi Yu stopped in her tracks. The gap between them was too great. First of all, there was a huge problem between them. Her marriage. Let's go. Li Jinnan's voice was low and slow. It had an indescribable magnetism to it. Yi Yu let out a long sigh and walked with Li Jinnan in silence. Soon they reached the Kingstown riverside. The wind at night was very cool. Beautiful lights were reflected on the surface of the river. At first glance, it was a beautiful sight. But, just like the person beside her, it was unreachable. GM Li. Yi Yu looked at the surface of the river. Her eyes were fixed on the surface of the lake. Calling me GM Li is too distant. Li Jinnan held a cigarette between his fingers. He gently flicked the ash off and said, I don't like it. Change it. Yi Yu was silent. She looked at the sparks between his fingers and said, I don't think we're compatible. Li Jinnan chuckled. His cold gaze swept over her. Like the gentle breeze on the river, he said, I think we're compatible. We think. Yi Yu paused for a moment before saying, The gap between us is too big. Li Jinnan didn't say anything. He shifted to the side, and the distance between them was shortened. Yi Yu was speechless. She instinctively moved to the side, but her waist was held tightly. In an instant, the man beside her had already turned his head. His deep, dark eyes stared at her. His red lips curved into a half-smile as he said, You don't have to worry about whether the gap between us is big or not. Leave Shen Luo to me. No matter what, the two of you are only a fake couple. Sooner or later, you'll have to separate. Li Jinnan's grip was too tight, and the distance between them was shortened. Yi Yu could clearly feel the warmth of the man beside her, and the smell of cigarette smoke. She frowned and pushed him away in resistance. However, Li Jinnan's hand didn't budge. He said, If you move again, you won't be going home tonight. Yi Yu was stunned. Her face turned red with anger. She gritted her teeth and said, Pervert. Li Jinnan didn't look at her. Instead, he stared at the cigarette in his hand and said, Isn't there a saying that women don't like bad men? A hooligan is a hooligan if you like it. I don't love him. Yi Yu immediately retorted. It doesn't matter. Li Jinnan seemed to have expected it. He took a drag on his cigarette and said, You will love her sooner or later. Yi Yu puffed up her cheeks and asked, What's the point of you doing this? Some people are addicted to alcohol. Some people are addicted to smoking. Some people are addicted to drugs. Do you know why? Li Jinnan looked at her with his dark eyes. His eyes were as dark as the night, as if he wanted to suck her in. Yi Yu was stunned for a moment before replying, It's because they're addicted. Li Jinnan's eyes curved slightly, and he nodded slightly. His gaze returned to the surface of the river as he continued. Yeah. Because I'm addicted. I don't want to restrain myself. So I indulged myself. In an instant, Yu understood what he meant. Because he was addicted, he didn't want to restrain himself, so he indulged. What a perfect sentence. It was indeed something that someone like him would say. Yu pursed her lips slightly. For some reason her heart was moved. Chapter 1444. The breeze from the river was cool. The reflection of the street was bright and sparkling on the surface of the river. Yu looked at the side profile of the man beside her. His face was tense and determined. Something was changing in the depths of her heart. As if sensing Yuyu's gaze, Li Jinnan turned to look at her. His deep, dark eyes could clearly see the expression on Yuyu's face. Her emotions began to change. His lips turned up. He tilted his head slightly and said, "Let's go." Huh? Yu asked. You don't want to go home? Li Jinnan put out his cigarette and asked with a half smile. Or do you want to get a room with me? No. Yu objected immediately. The smile in Li Jinnan's eyes deepened as he said, Then let's get a room. I said I don't want to get a room. Yu gritted her teeth. Li Jinnan didn't care. He put his hands in his pockets and turned to leave. Yu followed behind and shouted, I'm going home. Yeah. You don't have to send me home. You should go back. It's getting late. My car is downstairs. The wedding date was on schedule. The house that Wen Fenglin had bought wasn't big. The group of friends and relatives had already filled up the house. Lily was wearing her wedding gown. She was excited and nervous at the thought of seeing the man that she had been thinking about day and night. It was a kind of unknown future, and a longing for the arrival of happiness. The groom is here. The groom is here. A childish voice called out. Everyone in the house couldn't help but love him. Li Jianyue was wearing a cute white dress and black leather shoes. She ran inside and said, Uncle Oming is here. Brother Mosen, hold the door and don't let Uncle Oming in. The little girl's sweet voice made everyone around laugh. Someone couldn't help but tease. How can we not let your Uncle Oming in? Your Uncle Oming still has to marry his wife. Exactly. Do you want your Uncle Oming to not marry your Auntie Lily? Li Jianyue heard that and stood firm. She put her hands on her hips and said, Auntie Chantian said that if Uncle Oming isn't sincere, he can't marry his wife. Brother Mosen, am I right? The little boy Li Mosen, who had been called out, nodded his head when he heard Li Jianyue's words. With a serious expression he said, Yes, not only do you have to marry a wife, but you also have to be sincere in wooing a wife. Io, this little fellow has awareness. Little comrade, you have a bright future. Whose child is this? He must be from Su Qianxi's family. So cute. This is a mixed race, a Prince Charming. The compliments around him made Li Mosen a little embarrassed. He blushed, but he did not retreat. He stood with Li Jianyue. This little flower boy looks so good standing there. Both boys and girls are cute. This girl looks so much like Su Qianxi and Li Xiqing. You can tell it's their child at a glance. As one of the bridesmaids, Yi Qianqian came forward to protect the two little flower girls and said, Don't scare our little angels. Hurry up and prepare your red packets. Oming is here. We can't let him marry our little princess so easily. Yu Lily, who was surrounded, suddenly felt a burst of happiness in her heart. Chapter 1445. She just said that she went out to buy something. I think she'll be back soon. Give her a call, someone said. Hearing that, Yu Lily subconsciously thought of the conversation she had with Shen Manting a few days ago. For some reason she felt a little strange. When she heard what her friend said, she picked up her phone and dialed Shen Manting's number. However, Shen Manting's phone rang behind her. Yi Qianqian followed the ringtone and quickly took out a white phone. She waved the phone and said, The phone is here, but she's not. Maybe she went out to relax. Yu Lily murmured as if to comfort herself. After a while, she heard the doorbell ring. Oh, the groom and the groomsmen are here. Everyone get ready. Yi Qianqian put the matter at the back of her mind and quickly waved her hand. She led a group of colleagues and friends toward the door to hide. Yi Qianqian pushed Li Jianhua to the door, and the little girl immediately called out, "Who is it?" It was a young girl's voice, familiar and sweet. Oming couldn't help but laugh and said, "It's me. Who are you?" "I'm Uncle Oming." "Who are you today?" Li Jianhua shouted according to the lines that Yi Qianqian had arranged for her. "I'm the groom. I heard that the groom has to give a red packet. Where's Uncle Oming's red packet?" "Open the door. Uncle will give you a red packet." "All right," Li Jianhua shouted. "Open the door." Yi Qianqian rubbed Li Jianhua's fluffy little head and praised, "Great." Soon, the door was opened, and the group of bridesmaids inside all shouted, "Who is it?" The groomsmen behind him were all Oming's friends. When they heard that, they all laughed and said, "The groom is here to pick up the bride." "Sincerity," the group of bridesmaids shouted. Then, Oming quickly took out a stack of red packets and said, "Sincerity?" The group of bridesmaids shouted happily. Li Jianhua's small body also shouted and jumped up. Everyone was paying attention to the little cutie. Oming stuffed all the red packets into the little girl's hands and said, "Help Uncle give out red packets." "Okay." Li Jianhua held a pile of red envelopes and shouted excitedly, "Brother Mosin, red envelopes." The adults all laughed. But Yi Qianqian wasn't about to let Oming in. She said, "Where's your sincerity? Declare your love. Shout it out." The groomsmen sighed and said, "Why didn't you follow the rules? You should have opened the door after taking the red packet." "Our young master O doesn't know how to speak, but he still wants to declare his love. Ha 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 ha. Master O, a declaration of love." He touched his nose and said, "A declaration of love. Let me think about it." The scene was filled with cheers and hoots. One of Yi Qianqian's friends walked out with a microphone that had been prepared beforehand and said, "Come, come, come. This is a declaration of love. Where's the applause?" Cheers and whistles instantly rang out. They were all a group of young people, and they were all very open. When they saw such a scene, they all became excited. A microphone was stuffed into Oming's hand. There was a smile on his handsome face, and a pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes. However, he couldn't see the figure that he hadn't seen for decades. "You Lily." His deep and magnetic voice had a touch of evil that was exclusive to Oming. Chapter 1446. Especially when she heard that the cheers outside had quieted down, this feeling was even stronger. He stood up, opened the door a crack and peeked out. "You Lily." Oming's voice came again, and he called her name again. "I'm here." A few simple words fell into Yu Lily's heart. Sweet happiness began to quickly ferment. Outside, there was a commotion, and the bridesmaids immediately began to dislike him. "Isn't this a declaration of love? Why is it so simple? No, do it again." Oming really didn't know how to say those sweet words. Hearing the dislike around him, he helplessly scratched his ears and cheeks, thought for a moment and said, "You Lily, I did a lot of things wrong in the past, and I even hurt you again and again. Many times we broke up and got back together. Every time, although I didn't say it, I know you must be very sad." As Oming spoke, his face turned red, especially after seeing the eyes around him. He coughed a little unnaturally and said, "But it doesn't matter. The sadness I caused you in the past, let me compensate you bit by bit in the future. We have a lifetime, and in the future we will have children. I will continue my feelings for you to our next generation, and our future forever." Well said. The best men immediately clapped their hands and started to applaud. In the room, Yu Lily burst into laughter, but her eyes were inexplicably hot. There was a commotion outside, and Yu Lily immediately returned to the bed and sat down. Soon the room door was opened. The group of bridesmaids rushed in and surrounded Yu Lily in an instant. Yu Lily was wearing a wedding dress that Oming had carefully designed, exquisite and gorgeous. Oming looked at Yu Lily. The long separation had made the eyes of his beloved woman in front of him even more beautiful, and it made his heart beat even more. Yu Lily stood up, surrounded by people. Looking at the man in front of her, she had not seen for a long time, chuckled and said, "The words you just said are really not suitable for you." Oming walked forward, stared at her, and slowly said, "I will do it." Yu Lily's lips curved, and her laughter was light. Like a bird, She flew forward and landed firmly in his arms. Yi Qianqian was secretly envious. Suddenly, the cell phone in her handbag rang again. It was Shen Manting's cell phone. Yi Qianqian walked to a corner and picked up her cell phone. She immediately saw the caller. Shen Luoan. The relationship between Shen Manting and Shen Luo and had long been an open secret. Yi Qianqian's messages were never restricted. When she saw the number, she ignored it and put it back. Yi Qianqian searched the entire area, but she couldn't find any trace of Shen Manting. However, Shen Luoan made no less than 5 calls in a row. Ding dong, she received a text message from Shen Luoan. Where are you? If you don't tell me, I'll go to Oming's wedding to find you. Yi Qianqian sneered when she read the news. This fellow. It seemed like he was born to be a rotten person. Not only did he treat Yi Yu this way, but he also treated Shen Manting this way. Rotten. Rotten to the core. Following that, Shen Luoan called her again. Yi Qianqian quickly answered the call and angrily said, Shen Manting has gone out. I didn't bring my phone. When he heard Yi Qianqian's voice, he seemed to be a little angry. Where did she go? Chapter 1447. When Yi Qianqian heard Shen Luoan's words, she became even angrier. She opened her mouth and scolded. Are you crazy? She is your sister and your lover. Everyone knows the relationship between you and Yi Yu. She is your wife, but you are taking care of a childhood friend who has nothing to do with you. How can you ask where Shen Manting is now? You ask me, how do I know? When I found this phone, she had already disappeared. Shouldn't you ask yourself this question? Yi Qianqian's voice was not low, and she spoke quickly like a machine gun. Shen Luo, and became even more angry and said in a deep voice, Don't play tricks on me. Ask Shen Manting to answer the phone. Ha! Yi Qianqian sneered. You still want to play tricks? Do you think you are a wreath? I am not your dog. Goodbye. After that, he hung up the phone. Yi Qianqian hung up the phone and felt happy. She turned on Shen Manting's phone and blocked Shen Luoan's phone number. Shen Manting deliberately came to Kingstown to be Yu Lily's bridesmaid. She probably wanted to get rid of Shen Luoan's shackles. In this case, she had done a good deed. Yi Qianqian closed the page. However, at a glance, she saw a few big words written on the screen of Shen Manting's phone. If you see my phone, please help me open the notebook. It was a white page with black words. The words were large and clear at a glance. Yi Qianqian was stunned. Looking at the phone, she suddenly felt at a loss. Is this just a desktop or some kind of message? How did she know that someone would touch her phone? Yi Qianqian was curious, but she quickly realized that Shen Manting's phone did not have a password set. Nowadays, every normal person's phone must have a password set or a wrinkle to unlock it. But Shen Manting's phone could be unlocked with a light swipe, and there was very little software. Yi Qianqian opened the notebook suspiciously. When she clicked on it, she saw a text file that was filled with densely packed words. It read, I am Shen Manting. Although I don't know who you are. If you see this notebook, thank you for paying attention to me. Please pass my cell phone to Shen Luo, and then let him open my favorite box. Thank you. On the right-hand side of my bed, there is a crystal bottle. Inside the bottle is my gift of thanks to you. Thank you for helping me pass the message. Thank you for paying attention to me. There weren't many words, but every single one of them was filled with a sense of farewell. Yi Qianqian was shocked. She opened the other apps on her phone and found that all her social media accounts and contact data had been cleared. All that was left was Shen Luoan. In other words, Shen Manting had long been prepared for this decision. Yi Qianqian flipped through it and found an encrypted document in one of the programs. There was an encrypted file in the document. Yi Qianqian tried to open it, but she needed to enter the password. Come to think of it, this must be her willingness to hand over the phone to Shen Luoan, right? Yi Qianqian felt a little regretful. She quickly closed the web page and removed Shen Luoan's number from the blacklist. She dialed his number. Chapter 1448. When Yi Qianqian heard his words, she knew that he must have found out about Shen Manting's departure. After a moment of silence, Yi Qianqian actually felt a little sad. He asked again. Did she say anything to you before she left? Yi Qianqian thought about it and sighed. She said, I don't know. I'm not close to Enchanting, but I'm sure she's no longer in Kingstown. If you look for her, you might be able to find her. Shen Luo suddenly felt a little flustered when he heard this. This was a feeling he had never felt before. It was just like the physiological reaction he had when he approached Enchanting. It was as if he had encountered a magnet. This feeling was sudden and inexplicable. Shen Luo felt an inexplicable sense of irritation. He couldn't help but sneer and say, Why should I look for her? Yi Qianqian's sadness suddenly turned into anger. She was so angry that she yelled, Go to hell! She hung up the phone and stomped her feet in anger. Scum! Bastard! Disgusting man! Useless man! Transplanting machine man! But after hanging up, she remembered that she was supposed to give the phone to Shen Luo, but she didn't want to give it to him anymore. What a slut! Qianqian, where did you go? Someone shouted from afar. Yi Qianqian immediately replied, Coming. Today was the wedding day of Oming and Yulili. They couldn't be too anxious. They had to be happy. Yi Qianqian adjusted her emotions and let out a long sigh before walking out. Oming had already helped the bride into the wedding car, and the scene was filled with cheers. Yi Qianqian placed her cell phone in her handbag before following him. Enchanting's sudden departure was hard for him to accept. Sitting on Enchanting's bed, Shen Luo stared blankly at the door, as if a tall and voluptuous figure was standing there. Enchanting left? Therefore, going to Kingstown to be Lily's bridesmaid was just an excuse. That woman only wanted to escape from him. That was all. With this realization, Shen Luo suddenly felt a little ridiculous. Escape from him? What right does Enchanting have to do that? What she had, what she wanted, and what she got were all given by the Shen family. Why should she escape? After enjoying everything he wanted, he just left, right? How could there be such a thing in the world? Shen Luo abruptly stood up from the bed, picked up his phone, and dialed a number. Help me find someone. The person on the other side had never heard Shen Luo speak so angrily and anxiously. He was stunned for a moment and immediately asked, Who is it? My woman Enchanting. The surrounding scenery flashed past quickly, and the fuselage shook violently because it was moving. When the sound of something slicing through the air rang out, everything in the surroundings seemed to have gradually become distant. Her field of vision was getting higher and higher, and the ground was getting farther and farther away. When she finally saw the layers of white clouds, her heart, which had been tense all this while, suddenly relaxed. However, perhaps it was because she had been in a highly tense state of mind all of a sudden, that her heart began to tremble. Inexplicably, her eyes began to sting, and a warm current welled up in her eyes. For a moment, she couldn't hold back her tears. She let out a low whimper, and big drops of tears rolled down her cheeks and fell into the plush toy in her arms. Chapter 1449. In the Holy Church, Jesus was nailed to the center of the cross. The priest stood in the center and announced the wedding of the couple. The atmosphere was getting better and better, and everyone was beaming. But Yi Qianqian had something else hidden in her heart. Qianqian, what are you thinking about? Lily is going to throw the bouquet. A colleague nudged Yi Qianqian, who was in a daze, and reminded her. Yi Qianqian snapped back to her senses and saw Yu Lily's blissfully slender back. At that moment, Yu Lily's back was facing them. She shouted, 1, 2, 3, catch it. Just as Yu Lily's voice fell, the girls began to shout and collectively snatch the bouquet. Since they were attending the wedding, they had to participate in the bouquet throwing activities. It was said that the person who got the bouquet would be the next to get married. Regardless of whether the rumor was true or not, everyone was just doing it for fun. But after all the hustle and bustle, the bouquet ended up in the hands of a person who had been standing at the back the entire time. Everyone looked at the person. Yi Yu looked at the bouquet in her hand in a daze. She looked around and seemed a little embarrassed. She said, Ever since Yi Yu had arrived, no one had paid much attention to her. Now that she had suddenly become the owner of the bouquet, many people looked over. Many people's eyes lit up when they saw her. They began to whisper. Who is that? She's so pretty. She looks so much like Yi Qianqian. She must be Yi Qianqian's younger sister. But she's much prettier than Yi Qianqian. Hey, she looks a little familiar. Is she some celebrity? Li Jinnan stood in the crowd and immediately noticed the shy Yi Yuyu. The corners of his mouth turned up slightly. He found her adorable. Su Qianxi was leading the two children. When she saw Li Jinnan's subtle but genuine expression, she immediately understood what he meant. She nudged him mischievously and teased, Have you taken a fancy to her? Li Jinnan glanced at Su Qianxi. On that familiar face was a smile that he was very familiar with. He didn't nod or shake his head, but the smile on his lips deepened. Su Qianxi understood at a glance and said, This girl is really good. She's pretty and has a good personality. But I heard that she's married. The married person received the bouquet. Did this mean that they were married again? Su Qianxi had this thought in her mind and was immediately startled. She wouldn't marry her second uncle, would she? How could he do that? His rational mind told him that he shouldn't be superstitious and that he should just play around with things. However, Su Qianxi was reborn. For such things, she would rather believe them than not believe them. The smile on Li Jinnan's face faded a little. Without a word, he walked in the direction of Yi Yuyu. Seeing this, Su Qianxi's heart skipped a beat, and she thought it's over. Uncle is really interested in Yi Qianqian's younger sister. What should I do? Su Qianxi subconsciously looked at Yi Yuyu and accidentally found that Yi Yuyu seemed to be looking at her. For a moment she was embarrassed. Smiling politely, she quickly turned her head. Yi Yuyu retracted her gaze, feeling a sense of loneliness in her heart. Chapter 1450. That's fine. In any case, I probably won't be with him anymore. The distance between us is too great. Li Jinnan walked through the crowd toward Yi Yuyu. By the time he arrived, most of the people had already dispersed. Yi Yuyu and Yi Qianqian were standing together talking. When she saw Li Jinnan walk over, Yi Qianqian took a step back and said, Yuyu, I'm going to use the restroom. Remember to come to the hotel for dinner later. Li Jinnan was very pleased with Yi Qianqian's tactfulness and gave her a look of approval. Yi Yuyu held the bouquet in her hands and felt a little uneasy. She lowered her head and was about to walk away when she was blocked. Li Jinnan stopped her with one long arm. With his long fingers, he took the bouquet she was holding and said in a low voice, Congratulations. You're next. Li Jinnan smelled of tobacco. It wasn't strong, but it smelled good. When Yi Yuyu heard Li Jinnan's obvious words, she felt a little repulsed. He had just been standing and talking with the woman he liked. His gaze was so gentle, and he looked so lovey-dovey. The next moment, he was openly seducing a married woman. Do men like that all like to play with people like that? Yi Yuyu looked up at him and said, GM Li, you must be joking. You know that I'm already married. Who said you can't get married a second time? Li Jinnan said matter-of-factly, I'll give you a second time. Yi Yuyu's heart skipped a beat. She looked up and around her. She realized that there were still people looking at her. Her heart was in her throat. This feeling was no different from having an affair. Luckily, Li Jinnan's voice was very soft. Otherwise, she would have been even more embarrassed. Yi Yuyu lowered her head and quickly said, Since you like this bouquet, I'll let you have it. Goodbye. With that, Yi Yuyu immediately turned around and left. Li Jinnan held the bouquet of white roses in his hands. His heart was filled with surprise and surprise. It was a very strange feeling. Looking at the flowers, he smiled and muttered to himself, This is the first time a woman has given me flowers. Why is she so careless? When he said that, even Li Jinnan laughed. He looked in the direction that Yi Yuyu had fled in with a gentle gaze. The direction and goal in his heart became clearer and clearer. If he wanted her, it would be her. Yi Yuyu could clearly feel Li Jinnan's threatening gaze behind her. She cautiously walked all the way to the bathroom. When she felt that no one was looking at her, she quietly breathed a sigh of relief. He splashed his face with water, and then he heard voices coming from inside. His voice wasn't loud, so Yi Yuyu couldn't hear him clearly. He could vaguely tell that it was Yi Qianqian's voice. He walked in and knocked on the door. Sis, are you here? When Yi Qianqian heard Yi Yu's voice, she immediately paused and replied, "It's me." Yi Yu walked in. Yi Qianqian was talking on the phone with an unhappy expression on her face. "What's wrong?" Yi Yu asked. Yi Qianqian waved her hand and motioned for her to keep quiet. Then, she said in an extremely unfriendly tone, "It's up to you whether you believe me or not. I really don't know. I just picked up her cell phone. Besides, what does Enchanting's escape have to do with me? F***ck. Don't force me to swear. I will send the phone to you. Just give me an address. As for the rest, it's none of my business." These words contained a lot of information. Chapter 1451. Yi Qianqian turned and saw Yi Yu's expression. She felt a little awkward and said, "Yu Yu, wait a minute." Shen Luoan was silent on the other end. He had always had special feelings for Yi Yu. She was his wife and his childhood sweetheart. But, when Yi Yu heard Yi Qianqian's confession, she leaned forward curiously. Yi Qianqian hung up the phone. "Yi Yu didn't hear anything. What are you talking about? What do you mean by Enchanting ran away?" Yi Yu had a bad feeling in her heart. She looked at Yi Qianqian's guilty eyes and asked in a questioning tone, "How did you know?" As she spoke, her eyes fell on Yi Qianqian's hand. "This phone belongs to Enchanting, doesn't it?" "Aya." Yi Qianqian was getting impatient. "Can you stop asking? It's not a good thing for you anyway." "What do you mean?" "Aya. I'm not sure what happened. But didn't Enchanting say she was going to be Lily's bridesmaid today?" Yi Yu nodded. Yi Qianqian continued. "Actually, it was just a ruse. Enchanting left her cell phone here and waited for us to find it. After leaving a message, we don't know where she went. I'm guessing that she's already gone. But Shen Luo is like a F***king psychopath. He keeps calling and pressing for answers." Yi Qianqian clenched her teeth in anger and said, "But it's best if Shen Luo finds that woman. Otherwise, he'll definitely pester you in the future." Enchanting also diverted his attention. If Enchanting really runs away from home and doesn't come back, then... Yi Qianqian was terrified. "Absolutely not. You must get a divorce. This kind of man is unacceptable." Yi Yu was silent when she heard that. Enchanting really left. It wasn't that Yi Yu didn't know about the relationship between Shen Luo and her. She just didn't know how they interacted. When she saw this result, she naturally knew it wasn't good. She pursed her lips and said, "Don't be afraid, older sister. Even if Enchanting is gone, there's still Guanquei. We've been separated for more than a year since our marriage. In a few more months, we'll be able to file for divorce." When Yi Qianqian heard that, a look of shock and disbelief appeared on her face. She exclaimed, "Oh my God! You've finally come around. Oh my God!" What followed was astonishing excitement. Yi Qianqian suddenly jumped up and laughed out loud. She immediately hugged Yi Yu and shouted, "That's great! That's great! You must hold on to Li Jinnan. Compared to that perverted scumbag, he is the best of the best." Yi Qianqian's exaggerated expression and tone made Yi Yu feel guilty. He immediately pushed her down and covered her mouth. "Keep your voice down. What if someone hears you?" When Yi Qianqian heard that, she got even more excited. She put her arm around Yi Qianqian's shoulder and asked, "How's your relationship with Li Jinnan now? Oh my, why did you come back so early the night before yesterday? You should have stayed a little longer to cultivate your relationship. Don't mess around." Yi Yu looked at her reproachfully. "Between him and me, I don't think it's possible." Chapter 1452. Yi Qianqian didn't know about Yi Yu's concerns. She patted Yi Yu's shoulder excitedly and rebuked her. "It's not that far away. As long as you get a divorce, everything will go smoothly. GM Li is very interested in you." Yi Yu didn't want to continue the conversation. She pushed Yi Yu away and said, "Let's go. There are many people here. It'll be awkward if someone hears us." Yi Qianqian's mood brightened immediately. She nodded her head and led Yi Yu out. Many people had already gone to the hotel. After Yi Qianqian and Yi Yu walked out, the crowd around them had lessened. Just as they walked out, they saw a black car parked outside. The car was a beautiful mirror, and the reflection of the two of them was reflected in it. In an instant, the car window was lowered, revealing the face of the person inside. Yi Yu and Yi Qianqian thought of the same person at the same time. Li Jin'an. But when the car window was lowered, they saw another face. His face was handsome and resolute. It was a very pleasing to the eye. However, when compared to Li Jin'an's, it was a far cry from his looks. Yi Yu and Yi Qianqian were a little disappointed. The man said, "Miss Yi, third young master asked me to pick you up." That one sentence pulled back all the disappointment in his heart. They naturally knew who third young master was referring to. The two of them quickly got into the car. Yi Qianqian looked a little happy and said, "There are too many people here. Third young master is so considerate." Yi Yu pursed her lips and didn't say a word. The hotel wasn't far, and there were many guests coming and going. It was very lively. Eulili changed her clothes and changed her makeup in the bridal room. She was so tired that she was about to collapse. The dress for the toast was a long red cheongsam. She had to wear a pair of very high heels. Usually, this was no trouble for Eulili. But today it was a little difficult for Eulili. When she stepped out of the door in her high heels, she almost fell. The assistant beside her was quick to react and immediately supported her. Eulili was still in shock. Before she could breathe a sigh of relief, she heard familiar footsteps. Oming was extraordinarily handsome that day. He was wearing a black silk Chinese tunic suit with dark patterns and a jazz hat on his head. When he walked over, a pair of bright, almond-shaped eyes looked over, and he walked a little faster to take Eulili. Feeling the familiar aura, Eulili's heart calmed down. "You go ahead with your work," Oming said to his assistant. The assistant quickly left. Oming held Eulili up and asked with a frown, "What's wrong? Too tired?" "Well." Eulili stood up straight and looked up at him. Her eyes were sparkling. She smiled sweetly and said, "Come in." With that, she pulled him back into the bride's room. Her footsteps were a little hurried, and she couldn't wait any longer. Oming, who was watching from behind, was shocked. He put his hand behind her. As soon as they entered, Eulili closed the door. But before she had time to lock it, she was taken by a strong and powerful hand. Eulili was caught off guard and bumped into a strong chest. In a moment, she clearly felt a strong heartbeat in front of her and a burning gaze. Chapter 1453. The assistant stood outside for a few minutes, guessing that something unspeakable was going on inside. She took a look and saw that 5 minutes had passed before she knocked on the door again. But this time the door opened quickly. The assistant was surprised. So fast. The person who opened the door was Oming. Oming's black Chinese tunic suit was still the same. It was very neat and tidy, without the slightest hint of disarray. It gave off a sense of propriety and respectability. The assistant was even more surprised when she saw it. Could it be that she was wrong? Oming looked at the assistant and said, "Help her touch up her makeup." With that he walked away. When the assistant walked in, Eulili's face was abnormally red. The lipstick on her lips had been smeared on her makeup. Eulili was in the middle of putting on makeup in front of the mirror. When she saw the assistant come over, she put down the cotton pad and said, "You're more professional. You do it." The assistant touched up Eulili's makeup and quickly took her out. Eulili toasted along the way. There were many friends of Qiao Ziqing and Ohuijin, as well as various relatives. Eulili's legs felt like they were about to break. Oming supported her along the way. Their bodies were pressed against each other, and there was no gap in their warmth. That kind of distance made the two people who hadn't seen each other in a long time even more restless. The torment was too torturous. After Oming calmed down a few times, he finally drank some wine with his buddies. By the time it was over, it was already very late. Eulili sat alone in the bride's room, waiting for Oming to finish. But as she waited, she quickly fell asleep. In her dreams, she felt like her body was floating like a boat. She floated on and on until she finally reached the side of a warm lake. She opened her eyes tiredly and found her surroundings dark. Oming was beside her. When he sensed that she had woken up, he asked, "You're awake?" Eulili got up and looked out the window. She yawned. "We're not home yet. I'm so tired." "Soon." Oming reached out and took her hand. When he saw the beautiful and exquisite diamond ring on her finger, he smiled in satisfaction and said, "If you're tired, sleep a little longer. I'll carry you back later." Eulili leaned on his shoulder and glanced at the driver who was driving. Then she quickly kissed him on the cheek. There was a big red mark on Oming's face, which looked sexy and funny. The driver in front glanced back through the rearview mirror, but he didn't dare to look too much. He immediately turned his eyes away. Oming's expression was the same as usual. It was as if he didn't feel anything. His lips still had a faint and evil smile. However, the hand that was holding her tightened slightly. His well-defined fingers shuttled back and forth between her fingers, and the speed was getting faster and faster. Eulili didn't react at first, but soon, she felt her face burning. She clamped his hand hard and looked at the driver in front. When she found that he wasn't looking at her, she quietly breathed a sigh of relief. However, Oming seemed to have done it on purpose. He asked, "Why are you clamping it so tightly?" Hearing this, the driver immediately looked over with curiosity and surprise in his eyes. Eulili's face was burning hot as she exclaimed, "What the hell?" Chapter 1454. Xiao Ziqing was right. She had to be prepared at all times. But could she really have it just like that? Eulili felt a little guilty. When she saw Xiao Ziqing's expectant gaze, she felt even more guilty. Did Oming's mother know that she had an abortion? If she didn't, would she be angry when she found out now? Eulili was in a daze. Suddenly someone nudged her. When Fenglin looked at her and asked, "What are you thinking about? Why are you so engrossed?" Eulili shook her head and replied, "Daddy, have you eaten? Are you hungry?" "I've had lunch. I'm not hungry now." When Fenglin smiled happily, the two dimples on his lips were very deep. He looked at her and asked, "Would you like to cook for me?" Eulili giggled and hooked her arm around Wen Fenglin's and asked, "What would you like to eat, Daddy? I'll make it for you." "What about me?" Oming didn't back down. He walked over and said, "Hubby would like to eat sweet and sour pork ribs." When Fenglin smiled, looking at the happy couple, he felt extremely comforted. Eulili and Nanny Zhang went to buy some groceries and quickly started cooking at home. It had to be said that Eulili's culinary skills were excellent. Not only did she look and smell great, but she also took care of everyone's taste buds. After the meal, everyone was in a good mood. After the meal, Eulili sat on the sofa and dozed off. "Little pig, go to sleep after you're full." Oming sat beside her and put his arm around her shoulder so that she could lean on his shoulder. "Are you that tired? Let's go home early tonight. I won't torture you any longer." When Eulili heard that, her eyes flew open and she looked around. When she realized that there was no one around, she let out a sigh of relief. She turned her head and slapped Oming's hand. "You're going to die. You said it so loudly. It'll be so embarrassing if someone hears you." Oming felt a little innocent and replied, "We're husband and wife. Isn't it normal to torture each other? Mom and Dad are both experienced people. No one will laugh at you." Eulili was a little unhappy and turned her head away in a huff. But her body still leaned on Oming's. She felt tired and said, "I'm tired. Let's go back." "Well, let's go." Oming pulled her up, said goodbye to the elders and drove home. When she got home, Eulili didn't even want to take a shower. She just went straight to bed. Eulili's nap was incredible. He fell into bed around 8 in the evening and woke up around 9 in the morning. Eulili's head was heavy and her feet were light. When she got up, she felt her throat was very empty. She went to the bathroom to rinse her mouth, but as soon as the water entered her mouth, Eulili felt her mouth was bitter. All of a sudden, Eulili felt a wave of nausea in her throat, and she retched into the basin. The door to the bathroom wasn't closed. When Oming came back from his morning jog, he heard Eulili retching. He walked in with a frown and gently patted her back, asking in a low voice, "What's wrong?" "I slept for too long. I feel terrible." Eulili squeezed some toothpaste out of her mouth. "I'm fine now. I'll brush my teeth." Oming looked at her face. It was frighteningly pale. He reached out to touch her forehead and asked, "You look terrible. Where are you feeling uncomfortable?" "Oh." Eulili held a mouthful of water in her mouth. As she brushed her teeth, she mumbled, I slept for too long. I feel dizzy. I'm fine. You can go out. Chapter 1455. When Oming saw this, he felt that things weren't that simple. He reached out and patted her back. Are you feeling unwell from hunger? You slept for more than 10 hours. Yulili retched, but nothing came out. She waved her hand and said, I'm fine. I'll brush my teeth first. In the time it took to brush her teeth, Yulili vomited twice. Again nothing came out, but her body felt even more uncomfortable. After rinsing her mouth, Yulili felt like she was about to collapse. She stumbled back to the bed and lay on her stomach. Oming picked her up and walked out without saying a word. Yulili was about to vomit from the shaking. She groaned in discomfort and impatiently complained. What are you doing? I'm going to vomit. It's uncomfortable. I'll take you to the hospital for a checkup. You've never been like this before. You must be sick. You don't have a fever. Maybe you're dehydrated from sleeping for too long and have a heat stroke. Yulili gave up struggling. She lay on his body and lazily enjoyed the service of a human car. When they got into the car, Yulili leaned against the seat in a daze. She looked at the scenery along the road and didn't say a word. She didn't even want to move a finger. When they arrived at the hospital, Yulili was still weak. Oming had to carry her in. There were many people in the hospital. Oming had acquaintances in the hospital, so he didn't have to wait in line to get checked. Yulili didn't have a fever. Her body temperature was a little low. Her face was pale, and her limbs were weak. She was nauseous and retching. The old doctor looked at Yulili's condition again. After asking a few questions, he took off his glasses and placed them on the table. Go to the obstetrics and gynecology department for a blood test. Obstetrics and gynecology department? When they heard that word, Oming and Yulili were stunned. They thought they had heard wrong. Doctor, did you just say obstetrics and gynecology department? Oming found it hard to believe, but the smile on his lips continued to spread. Soon it spread all over his face. He said, You mean my wife is pregnant? Is that true? Oming's voice was a little loud. It sounded a little intimidating in the office. The old doctor picked his ear in disgust and said, How would I know? We'll only know after a checkup. Go and check. I can't guarantee that there's a child. Ha. Oming almost jumped up. He took Yulili's hand and said, Let's go and see the gynecology department. Yulili was still in a daze. She hadn't recovered from the shock when she heard the words. Being pulled by Oming, she lost her balance and leaned to the side. It wasn't much, and Yulili managed to stabilize herself in an instant. In an instant, Oming held her in his arms and protected her like she was a treasure. Seeing that she was safe and sound, he said, Be careful. Take care of the child. Yulili was shocked. The old doctor was even more disgusted. She tossed Yulili's medical records aside and said, I didn't say that I'm definitely pregnant. Don't be too happy. Go. Hurry up and register for the obstetrics and gynecology department. Oming quickly nodded his head and pulled Yulili up. As they walked, he placed his hands on either side of Yulili and stared at her stomach as he said, Be careful. Chapter 1456. Yulili's slightly lonely expression made Oming's heart ache. He placed his warm palm on her shoulder and said softly, No, you can be pregnant. Didn't the doctor say that there is a possibility that you are already pregnant? You have to believe the doctor. Let's go. We'll know after a checkup. Yulili's heart felt a little uneasy, and she was always a little timid, but her desire for a child was very strong. After thinking about it again and again, Yulili followed Oming to the obstetrics and gynecology department. After a series of examinations and inquiries, the senior female doctor pushed up her glasses and said, You are pregnant. Yulili was stunned by the few words that were spoken so casually. Oming acted as if he had won a prize. He laughed loudly and said, Really? Oming's reaction was too exaggerated. The doctor was already used to it. She nodded and continued to ask, How long has it been since your period came? Great. That was great. You are really pregnant. Oming hugged Yulili excitedly and shouted, Yulili, did you hear that? Pregnant. Lily still couldn't believe it and said, "Didn't they say that it is difficult for me to get pregnant? My uterus is cold. If you have a cold uterus, you need to pay more attention. It is more difficult to get pregnant, but it is not impossible. You need to be careful when you exercise. It is not easy to protect the fetus with a cold uterus." The doctor lowered her head to write and said, "When was the last time you had a period?" "More than a month ago. About 5-6 weeks. It has been so long. Didn't you notice it?" The doctor looked at her and asked, "My period is a bit messy. Sometimes it is less than a month. Sometimes it is 2 months, 3 months. The doctor frowned and said, "You can't be like this. How can you not take care of it? When did you start to feel uncomfortable?" "A few days ago. I am very tired and sleepy every day. And I can't eat, especially at our wedding a few days ago." "You just had your wedding a few days ago? Don't be too tired. I saw that you had an abortion before. And it was twins, right? A cold womb is probably the after effect of having an abortion. You didn't recuperate well during your confinement period, so your body is left with a lingering illness." The doctor asked meaningfully, "Do you have sexual intercourse frequently?" "Ahem." Lily was a little embarrassed. "Apart from my period, I have it every day." When the doctor heard that, she took a deep look at Ming and said, "Young man, you're in good health. But next, you'll have to control yourself when you're pregnant. From your reaction, you're still in the early stages of pregnancy. Now is the most dangerous time. Don't do strenuous exercise. It's not good for the baby, and the pregnant woman will also feel uncomfortable." Yes. Ming's eyes narrowed as he smiled. "I definitely won't. I'll prescribe you some health supplements to supplement your calcium. Go and have a checkup. You can go back when you're done." The doctor returned the medical record to Lily. Ming quickly picked up the medical records and carefully protected Lily as they walked. Be careful. The doctor found it funny, but at the same time, there was envy in his eyes. He shouted, "Zhaohong." After Lily was done with the examination, Ming was grinning from ear to ear the whole time. Chapter 1457. Ming smiled even more foolishly. He touched his head and said, "I'm going to be a father. Our children are back." Hearing that, Lily smiled and reached out to touch her lower abdomen. She felt a little magical. She thought she would never be a mother in her life. She didn't expect it to be so soon. This child came more suddenly than she had imagined. That's great. God didn't deprive me of my right to be a mother. God is still kind. Ming saw her little movement and stopped. He gently held her in his arms and whispered, "Don't think too much. In the future, I will be the father, and you will be the mother. These 5 children will definitely be born smoothly and healthily." Lily was amused by Ming's words. She reached out and patted him. "What do you think I am? 5 children?" Ming laughed and hugged her. He kissed her on the cheek and said, "Let's go back, mother of the children." "Well, yes, father of the children." As they went back and forth, their faces were filled with smiles. As soon as Ming got in the car, he called Xiao Ziqing. It was already afternoon, and Xiao Ziqing seemed to be working out. When she received Ming's call, she was a little out of breath and said, "Hello. If you have something to say it quickly. I'm very busy." Ming smiled and said as he drove, "Mom, I want to tell you something very happy. Do you want to guess?" "What is it? Just say it." "I don't have time to guess." Xiao Ziqing was a little impatient. She was running and panting. "Hey, why is your temper getting worse? Are you going through menopause? Get lost. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up." "Mom, you're going to be a grandmother." Ming's words were a little sudden, and Xiao Ziqing was stunned. She immediately pressed the stop button on the treadmill and asked incredulously, "What did you just say? You're going to be a grandmother. I'm going to be a father. And Lily is going to be a mother. Our little baby is going to be born." Xiao Ziqing laughed and said, "So fast. You're too amazing. I thought it would be difficult for Lily to get pregnant. I was already mentally prepared with your father, but you did this to me." Ming had turned on the car phone and put it on speaker. When the couple heard this, they were both stunned. "Mom, how did you know?" Xiao Ziqing was in a good mood. She snorted and said, Do you think Mommy doesn't know anything? Let me tell you, I know everything. Do you think you'll be fine just by hiding it from me? I will investigate it myself. In other words, Xiao Ziqing knew about this a long time ago, but she didn't use it to cause trouble for her. That meant that he had completely accepted Yulili, right? Realizing this, Yulili suddenly felt a little happy. An indescribable emotion rushed up from the bottom of his heart. Tears welled up in her eyes as she sobbed. Mom! Suddenly hearing Yulili's voice, Xiao Ziqing was silent. He stopped the car on the side of the road and comforted her. Why are you crying? Don't cry, don't cry. Be good and take good care of the child. I owe my wife, don't cry. Chapter 1458. Silly child. Xiao Ziqing's voice contained a hint of laughter. What's the use of blaming you? You're still my only daughter-in-law. Hearing this, Yulili sobbed even harder and burst into tears. Oming was at a loss. For a moment, he didn't know whether to hug her or hold her. He frantically wiped her tears and said, Don't cry, don't cry. On the other end of the line, Xiao Ziqing laughed and said, My silly son. During pregnancy, your emotions fluctuate greatly. It's normal to cry and laugh. Why are you acting like the idiot next door? When she heard Xiao Ziqing's mocking words, Yulili's sobbing stopped and she burst out laughing. This made Oming's cheeks turn red. He said, Mom, my wife is still here. How can you say that? On the other end of the line, Xiao Ziqing laughed even more happily and said, Do you have times when you're shy? All right, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm going to coax my wife. Oming hung up the phone and took a tissue to wipe her tears. But he found that Yulili's body was trembling slightly. He lifted her face and saw a big smile on her tear-stained face. Oming was speechless. This pregnant woman's emotions fluctuated greatly. One moment she was crying, the next moment she was laughing. But seeing her smile, Oming relaxed a lot. He smiled bitterly and said, You're going to make me crazy. Yulili laughed out loud and said, Idiot next door, ha 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 ha. Oming was speechless. Resigned to his fate, Oming quickly drove back to the villa. As he drove, he made phone calls. Along the way, Oming informed all his good friends. The first thing he called was Li Xiqing. The first thing he said was, Second brother, I'm going to be a father. Li Xiqing replied, Oh, I've been a father for a long time. No, mine is different from yours, Oming said. How is it different? Oh, I'm the father of a pair of twins. You only have one child, right? No, it's my first time being a father. I just found out today. Shouldn't you congratulate me? Li Xiqing was accompanying his wife for a prenatal checkup. Looking at Su Qianxi in the ultrasound room, he smiled and said, Congratulations, but I'm going to be a father for the second time. You should congratulate me too. Oming. I can't continue this conversation. He hung up the phone and called Luo Zhan. Luo Zhan was typing on the keyboard in the company. Lines of code jumped out, and the psychological sense of achievement was also surging. The phone rang. It was Oming. Before Luo Zhan could say hello, he heard Oming shout, Luo Zhan, I'm going to be a father. Luo Zhan's hand on the keyboard trembled, and all the code on the computer was gone. His first reaction was to shout, F***CK. He laughed out loud and said, My wife is pregnant. I'm finally going to be a father. Look at you. You're already 32 years old. Why don't you go find a partner and have fun? Luo Zhan silently restored the data and said, Didn't you just get married yesterday? Don't you usually get pregnant after half a year? Why don't you follow the rules? This is too much. Chapter 1459. Luo Zhan was speechless. I can't continue the conversation. Hearing the sound of the phone being hung up, Oming suddenly felt a sense of satisfaction. Following that, he made a lot of calls to his other friends. Oming was extremely happy. When he got home, Yulili couldn't take it anymore. She collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep. Oming hugged her and slept in his clothes. His lips curled up, and he was in a good mood. She slept for the whole day. Yulili's head was spinning. When she woke up, Oming was no longer by her side. Oming! Yulili called his name, but there was no response. She put on her slippers and opened the bedroom door. She heard a light noise outside. She walked downstairs and saw Oming busy in the kitchen. He was very busy. When she got closer, Lily was surprised. She burst out laughing and asked, "You're actually cooking?" When Oming heard that, he was caught off guard. His hands were scalded. He immediately pinched his ears and laughed. "I'm making soup. It's very simple. After it's done, I just need to add salt." "Did you add salt?" "Not yet. I'm afraid I'll add too much. You know better than me. Come over and add salt." Oming waved his hand. He put down the spoon in his hand and picked up the salt jar. Lily walked over slowly. After washing her hands, she added seasoning to the soup. "Do you have parsley?" "No." Oming suddenly realized and said, "No wonder I always felt that something was missing when I bought the ingredients. It was the parsley. I'll go buy it." "No need. I'll drink it all the same." Lily scooped some into a bowl and tasted it. She was a little surprised and said, "It's quite fragrant. You should try it too." "Really?" Oming suddenly felt that he was amazing. "It's my first time making soup." As he said that, he took a sip and frowned. "Are you serious?" There was only the taste of water. The ingredients hadn't even been boiled yet. It tasted terrible. Lily saw his expression and said, "It's quite delicious. It's much better than the first time I made soup." "Really?" "Sure enough, I'm talented in everything I do. When I become a father in the future, I'll definitely be a good father." As he said this, he laughed foolishly and said, "Do you think it will be 5 boys or 5 girls?" Lily almost choked. She elbowed him and laughed out loud. "Get lost. I think 3 girls and 2 boys would be better," Oming said with a serious face. "In that case, our family will have 3 little princesses and 2 little knights." "Why not a prince?" "The prince is the princess's partner. You can't have him so casually." Lily couldn't help but smile. She looked up and saw his bright and deep peach blossom eyes. She put down the bowl in her hand and hugged him. "Thank you, Oming." The gentleness on Oming's face deepened. He held her in his arms and whispered, "Are you thanking me for giving you such a handsome husband? Go away, shameless." Lily patted him and smiled. "I thought I wouldn't be able to have children in the future. Ever since the twins." "Don't mention that." Oming covered her mouth and said, "The quintuplets will be angry." Lily was speechless. "What's with that look? The quintuplets will really be angry." Oming smiled brightly and lowered his head to kiss her lips. "Don't think about the unhappy things in the past. Those 2 children are not fated with us. In the future we will have more children. Dash. Chapter 1460. I hope so. Lily leaned against Oming's chest, feeling a little guilty. The arrival of this child was a little sudden, and her heart had always had a kind of surreal feeling. It was another night of overtime. It had been a week since Oming and Lily had gotten married. Yu hadn't seen Li Jinnan for a week. She had heard that Li Jinnan had been on a business trip abroad and was very busy. Many people hadn't seen him and didn't know where he had gone. In fact, even she didn't know about it. Yu's feelings had been a little complicated these days. Perhaps it was a common problem for humans. They would always pay attention to someone they had slept with, even though she knew it was impossible for her to be with him. The lack of any news made her very concerned. Yu tried hard to put those thoughts aside and went out. Just as she hailed a cab, she received a text message on her phone. It was from a familiar number. Shen Luoan. "Do you have time these days? I have something to discuss with you." Yu stared at the number for a long time before closing the page. Her phone vibrated again. "It's about the divorce." Yu was stunned. "Shen Luoan wants to divorce me?" She stared at the string of words for a long time. An inexplicable feeling rose in her heart. Am I finally going to be liberated? But deep in her heart, there was a ferment of pain. Wave after wave, it gripped the tip of her heart, and it was difficult to bear. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Yu laughed out loud. She stared at the string of words on her phone and took a deep breath. "Let's get divorced. Everyone will feel better after a divorce." But this time he wants a divorce. Who is it because of? Enchanting? Or Guangquei? Yu felt a little upset and replied, "When?" Shen Luoan, as soon as possible. Ha! Yi Yu returned home, took a shower, and collapsed into bed. She slept until dawn. The next day, she went to the office and applied for leave from the HR manager. Her leave was quickly approved, and she bought the fastest ticket back to the capital. It was another foggy day. At a glance it was all gray. This is the capital. Just like the people in the imperial capital, no one could see through them. She called Shen Luoan, but he seemed to be busy. After a long time he picked up the phone. Hello. Have you arrived? Yeah, I'm at the airport. Where can I find you? Yi went straight to the point. There was silence on the other end. She waited for a few seconds before asking, What's wrong? Are you that impatient? Shen Luoan's voice seemed to carry a hint of bitterness. His indescribable emotions seeped into her heart. Her heart ached, and she felt a lump in her throat. She almost couldn't hold back her tears. The feelings they had built up over the years couldn't just disappear like that. For many years, she had dreamed of marrying her beloved brother Luoan. However, the grievances she had suffered over the past few years would not vanish just because of a few words from him. When he hated and resented her because of Guan Kui, when he abandoned her because of Shen Manting, she would also be in pain. When there was no trust in a relationship, there was no need to continue it, no matter what their relationship was. Chapter 1461. Yeah, I'm at the hospital. Come to the hospital. Shen Luoan added. This is the hospital you came to the last time. With that he hung up. Yi laughed bitterly. The last hospital was the one Guan Kui had been in. His meaning couldn't be any clearer. Shen Luoan was with Guan Kui. Yi hailed a cab to the hospital. She quickly found the ward she had been to the last time she had visited. Inside the ward, Guan Kui sat in her wheelchair. In her hands was a beautiful white wedding gown. Her face was filled with a blissful smile as she asked, Mommy, do you think I look good in this wedding gown? The wedding dress was huge. It was adorned with extravagantly beautiful sparkling diamonds. She gestured to herself and looked at Yi Tian with a radiant smile. Shen Luoan bought me this wedding dress. I love it so much. Yi Tian looked at Guan Kui warmly and took the wedding dress from her with both hands. She gestured to Guan Kui and said, When Shen Luoan comes back, Mommy will help you change into this. We'll wear it for him to see. Yi felt a dull pain in her chest. She stopped at the door of the ward and looked in. She saw her biological mother smiling warmly in front of another girl. Her heart was numb. Hadn't I been like this all these years? It didn't seem to make any difference. The sound of leather shoes came from behind her. It was the sound of calm and steady footsteps. Yi turned her head. At a glance, she saw a face that she was all too familiar with. Shen Luoan seemed much more tired than the last time they had met. His cheeks were sunken, and there were dark circles under his eyes. There was a faint green ring around his lips. He looked much more haggard. He must have had a hard time these past few days. Was it because of Shen Manting? Or was it because of Guan Kui? Or was it because of me? Yi couldn't help but laugh at that thought. Shen Luoan looked at her and asked, You're here? Looking at Shen Luoan, Yi's lips curled up into a smile as she said, Isn't that obvious? When can we sign? I'm very busy. Shen Luoan gazed deeply into her eyes. Then he averted his gaze and looked inside. Guan Kui and Yi Tian were both looking in their direction. It was obvious that they had noticed their presence. Guan Kui waved at Shen Luoan and smiled sweetly. Luoan. Shen Luoan smiled gently at her and said, Let's do it now. You'll be free in the future. Her eyes were looking at Guan Kui, but her words were directed at Yi Yu. She suddenly thought of what Shen Luoan had said on the phone just now. Are you that impatient? Yi Yu's heart sank. When she reached the Civil Affairs Bureau, Yi Yu took out the marriage certificate that she had treasured for a long time. When she replaced it with a divorce certificate, her heart didn't waver at all, as if that was how it should be. When they left the Civil Affairs Bureau together, he seemed to be in a terrible mood. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he lit up a cigarette in frustration. Originally, Shen Luoan did not like to smoke. When Yi Yu saw the way Shen Luoan was smoking, The first person that came to mind was Li Jinnan. Li Jinnan was the most good-looking man she had ever seen smoking. Shen Luoan noticed that she was a little distracted. Annoyed, he took a step forward and held her arm. Chapter 1462. Shen Luoan looked into her eyes with a violent rage. His grip on her arm tightened as he said, "Yi Yu, don't you like me very much? Don't you love me? Why have you changed so quickly?" When Yi Yu heard that, she looked into his eyes. Her initial helplessness slowly faded. When he saw the look in Yi Yu's eyes, Shen Luoan's heart grew colder. This pair of eyes that used to light up whenever they looked at him. This pair of eyes that used to smile whenever they saw him. Now, how did it change? Everything was different from before. Shen Luoan's grip on her hand tightened. An indescribable emotion welled up in his chest, threatening to burst out. "Mr. Shen, please conduct yourself with dignity." Yi Yu's voice was calm and distant as she waved her hand away. Shen Luoan's grip on her hand didn't loosen in the slightest. Yi Yu looked into his eyes with a hint of sarcasm. "What do you mean by this? Get your ex-wife back. What about the one in the hospital? She can't take any provocation now." She had heard about Guan Kui's illness. Even under such circumstances, Shen Luo and was willing to divorce her and marry Guan Kui. After all these years, he had treated her with true love. Yi Yu's face was full of sarcasm. It made Shen Luoan's heart ache. Suddenly, he felt a lump in his throat. Shen Luoan looked at the woman in front of him. Her eyes were still the same, but the distance between them had grown further and further apart. The childhood sweetheart he had once been so familiar with had become a stranger in the blink of an eye. They looked at each other without a word. Looking back, all that was left was the distance between them. "Yi Yu." Shen Luoan's voice was a little hoarse. He held the cigarette between his fingers. The smoke rose into the air and clouded his eyes. "Do you still love me?" Yi Yu stared at him for a moment before softly replying, I did. Shen Luo, and had gotten the answer he wanted. It was just that his heart felt even more empty. He released Yi Yu's hand and laughed bitterly. He put out the cigarette in the trash can beside him. Then, he got into his car and headed in the direction of the hospital. Yi Yu watched his back view from behind. Her heart couldn't help but tremble. "Do you still love me?" On countless nights, Yi Yu would ask herself the same question. Do you still love Shen Luoan? Still love. However, she could no longer afford to love him. Goodbye, Shen Luoan. Yi Yu stood rooted to the spot for a long time, before taking a step forward. However, just as she was about to move, a black Bentley by the roadside whistled. Yi Yu looked in the direction of the voice, and saw half a face peeking out from the window of the back seat. Her eyebrows were exquisite like a painting, and her lines were cold and firm. At this moment, a pair of phoenix eyes were looking straight at him, calm and profound. It was faint, but it made Yi Yu's heart flutter. She walked over. Before she reached the car, the chauffeur opened the door for her. Until they sat down, no one spoke. There was a faint scent of aromatherapy in the Bentley. As Yi Yu sat, she couldn't help but look out the window. Among the cars coming and going, there were also many men and women who were about to divorce, or had already divorced, driving side by side. But what were their feelings like? She turned her head to look at Li Jinnan and asked, "How did you know I was here?" "You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."